Okay, good morning, y'all. We're all here. Welcome on this gorgeous, beautiful November the 10th, Wednesday, to our General Finance Committee meeting. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 9:02 a.m. I will confirm all members are present, and I will confirm quorum, of course. There are no members absent. We also have the CAO clerk and members of our senior management team and staff present today. Thank you. I would advise that public input on the agenda was invited at the following email address, TML public comment at muskokalakes.ca. No correspondence was received. I'll read the public notice, which is that today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the Township of Muskoka website and YouTube channel. By participating in the open public meeting today, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded and posted online. I would acknowledge that there is no supplementary agenda issued for this meeting. And I would ask committee members for any disclosures of pecuniary interest at this time. Committee? Good, thank you. Seeing none. I'll read a note here on motions that the motions have been pre-populated with random movers and seconders to expedite the meeting. Members shall physically raise their hand until the clerk has confirmed the vote. If the vote is unclear, a verbal vote shall be recorded by the clerk. This is not considered a recorded vote. Okay, so we're going to move right into item 4 on our agenda today, which is delegations. I'm going to first call on item 4A, Ian Shelley of Blackline Consulting to actually reveal, uncover, discover with us collectively the IT strategic plan report. So Ian, you've got the floor. Welcome, and go ahead.
If I might, Chair.
Sorry, Mark, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you.
Our speaker, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. And thank you. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Ian Shelley. He is a partner at Blackline Consulting related to our IT strategic plan. So in June, Council will recall that we awarded an RFP for the development of an IT strategic plan to give us a real good on-the-ground sense of our current status with respect to our IT infrastructure and our IT services. And Mr. Shelley and his organization have come in and performed that task. They've done quite a number of extensive interviews with staff, with senior leadership, and with other organizations, other municipalities, both within the district and similar comparative peers, I would say, in Ontario, that would kind of give a bit of a good indication, benchmarking in terms of our structure and our size and how we perform in those areas. So what's been provided to committee this morning is a draft report that has been put together by Blackline Consulting to advise the township on its current IT status of its hardware and in some of its software needs going forward. And they have provided some high-level recommendations over a 4 to 5 year horizon, as was requested in the RFP, to help to guide future direction and future investments for the township with respect to its information technology. So this report is intended to really provide committee with that perspective and assessment in terms of where we are today. And the follow-up to this report would definitely involve more details with respect to an implementation plan that would help to actually specify the how, the who, and the how much in terms of this implementation as we move forward over the next number of years. So with that, I will open it up to committee, and Mr. Shelley is here to address any questions you might have with respect to the content of the report or any other questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Ian, you go right ahead. Listen, just before I do ask Ian for you to go ahead, am I seeing, is everyone connected electronically? Is everybody good? So I'm seeing Councillor, there's a few people that are having trouble connecting. Is that, so Councillor Roberts?
I've been having,
Go ahead, Councillor Mazan.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. I'm having quite a bit of instability on my end. I've tried to go onto my personal hotspot. I might go off camera, but I like just but I am still here listening. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. And Councillor Roberts, go ahead. What's up?
Councillor Edwards has informed me that he can see it just himself, but he can't hear anything. I see there he is again, connecting to audio. He might be okay now, but he's been talking to me about his difficulties.
I saw that. Okay, good. That's the question. Councillor Edwards, can you hear us? Okay. Sure.
I will call him and ask him to call in by landline.
Is there anything we can do from here now? Yeah, so, okay, so there's nothing we can do from this end. Sorry about that. Thanks, Councillor Roberts. Perhaps, Alan, you could get to us another way through audio. Yeah, good. Okay, so if you just go ahead and do that and we'll proceed. So there you go. So Ian, so we have some technical difficulties. You're the man to come on next. What a segue. You go right ahead, sir. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, Council. And I think what you've talked about really highlights what we've expressed in the report is that, there are limitations both to the region and what's available and to the township itself and what's been implemented. So what we've tried to do is provide a balanced opinion on what sort of IT we'd expect to see in a municipality like you, accepting there are some limitations with the region. I think what you see from the report really reflects the history that many of you, I'm sure, have witnessed of IT over the last, I'm going to say around 10 years or so. I mean, more than 10 years, you should have retired pretty much everything, but there's a story to be told in some of the decisions that have been made. And really some of the highlights that I want to put forward today to reflect for you is that, one of the limitations that the municipality faces is around broadband internet connectivity. And that, when you think about technology and technology going forward, is your linchpin. It's absolutely the linchpin. And so if we think of the last 18 months and the effect of COVID, and you're absolutely not alone in this situation, having staff working outside of the office and accessing systems that were based in the office creates a problem. On top of that, we see many systems moving to the cloud, which is having your servers outside of your office environment, and so then staff who are in the office need that broadband connectivity. So I point to that as an absolute linchpin of where you are at the moment, and that's not something to do with the township. That's something to do with the geographic area and the availability of broadband connectivity. So we've had conversations with staff around this being a key thrust of getting the connections not just to City Hall, but to the other sites as well, and making sure that what's needed at each of the sites from a connectivity perspective is there. So that's a huge thrust of what we put forward. Another aspect of what we've talked about is the outsourced relationship. And in no way are we suggesting that Near North is not doing a great job for the municipality. This is not an assessment of them in any way. But what we've pointed out is the contract that you have with Near North is by design limited. It has a set of terms that says that you will provide this set of services. But internally, there aren't really any IT staff who are picking up the other aspects of technology and technology decision-making that need to happen. Certainly, there are people who are willing and have been doing that to the extent they're capable, but they're not necessarily professional IT individuals. So we've highlighted that there are some gaps in that area around staffing and accountability. At the end of the day, the township has to be accountable for its IT systems, and to some extent that accountability is being pushed off to Near North, which in the current contract is not necessarily appropriate. As we get into systems, we've commented that in many areas it's basic but absolutely functional and suitable. So I don't want you to read this report as though it's it's an IT money grab. I think there's some of the aspects like the computer room. It's basic but absolutely functional. We're not going to suggest that much work needs to happen there, even though you can have far more sophisticated computer rooms. So as you look through the report, we've tried to be reasonable. So these are the areas that focus should come. Certainly there's some work around the infrastructure to build resilience. So we've talked about internet connectivity, but having second connections, you can't always rely on primary connections. At the moment, that's not something that's in place. So some focus on resilience is required, and recovery. If a disaster was to happen, can we get back and up and running? And more, and this links into the security piece, that disaster that municipalities are facing is a cyber disaster. It's a ransomware disaster. And so as we went through the security review and we looked at that, one of the primary thrusts we put forward is to have that plan. If this were to happen to us, if we were subject to ransomware like many of your neighbors have been, what would we do? What's our plan of action for that? And I think that's a key thing to have in place, is what's our plan, and do we have the equipment and the processes to get ourselves back up and running without suffering undue consequences. I think around the systems, there's certainly more that can be done on the online presence and providing services online. A lot of what's in the website at the moment is an informational website that provides residents with the how to get something done, but it doesn't provide them with the facility to do that online, to do online payments. There are some capabilities that have been put in place. There's the tax portal, for instance, is a good example of where some of that online capability, but there's so much opportunity. And again, not just for yourselves, but many municipalities we're working with are talking about the same things. How do we start delivering services online for residents? And again, the effect of COVID has really heightened that desire to be able to provide those services online. So in a real quick 5-minute elevator speech there, that's probably the highlights of our findings through the report and where we think there should be focus in the coming months and years from staff and at the municipality. And at that, I will pause and certainly open it up for questions that any of you may have.
Good, thank you. Appreciate it very much, and certainly a very insightful report. I'm going to open it up to the floor here for a couple of brief highlighting questions, and then, of course, down into that agenda, we're going to deal with this in a little separate entity. But for now, Councillor Hayes and then Councillor Roberts. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, to Mr. Shelley. I noticed that the library, the link to the library, was not mentioned at any point during the conversation. When the decision was made a few years ago to move from the district support to the near north support, the library was included in that, and there is a memorandum of understanding with how much bandwidth will be supplied, and so that should be included in the report as well.
I'd certainly be happy to make that addition. One of the challenges we've faced, which is lightly highlighted in the report, is nobody knows everything. There's been so many fingers in the pot that as we went round, we got bits and pieces of information. So for example, we put together a rudimentary network diagram. There isn't a network diagram that shows all the connections at the moment. So we did have some difficulty without having that point person that's got all of the IT knowledge, gathering it. So it could simply be an omission on our part, and I'll happily go back and check into that.
That's great. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, Councillor Roberts.
Okay, I will save most of my comments for when we get into the discussion of this. I missed the first part where you introduced this because I was doing IT support. With a further, so I will save my questions until we actually get into the. And Alan, I hope you're on now. Can you hear us? He's not. No, he's gone again. Okay.
Okay. I did, just to draw attention to that report, Ian, on a higher plane. I did note were the system to go down, it would take approximately a week to get it back up. I mean, I know in general terms. That I find that very disturbing, as we all would, of course, running our corporation the way we know we need to. So I thank you for your presence, your report. If I'm not sure if you're hanging around, if you do, welcome. We'll welcome you back. Item 6A on our agenda is certainly the report from Mark Donaldson as it relates to the IT strategic plan, his report and appendix, and we'll get to it then. So thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to call on item 4B. I'm going to call on Donna Kearney, Executive Director of the Hospice of Muskoka, to attend here now to discuss future plans, to unfold future plans to this committee. Donna, are you here? Donna, welcome. There you are. So good morning. Welcome to the General Finance Committee meeting. And you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just going to get my slides up, and thank you for.
Okay, we'll just, everything's going to be about IT today. You just know it. There we go.
Sorry.
We're fine. We're just getting those up. Sorry. Yeah, it'll just be a moment. We'll have those up on the screen.
I can probably start
Okay.
without the slides.
If you'd like, go ahead.
Thank you for hosting Hospice Muskoka this morning, and for the opportunity to present our data around what dying in Muskoka looks like at this time. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is just the numbers in Ontario. How many people per year die in Ontario each year? And it's out of 15 million people in Ontario, we have only 1% a year that dies. That may be a little bit different with COVID, but generally 1% per year die in Ontario. And of that 1%, 85% die with a chronic disease, cancer, or aging. So they're dying of conditions that are predictable, in the sense that we know that there's a trajectory that has a certain time frame, and that we can plan for those deaths. 15% of the 1% that die of unexpected causes, which we know we can never plan for. So out of the people who have a predictable trajectory of death, we know that about 2,500 of those people die in home or in hospice, which is where their preference is. But that's very low numbers, considering there's 15 million people in the province, and 70% of people actually identify that they want to die at home or in hospice. So we need to do better. And to make matters worse, I want to talk about the rural disparity around dying. And so we know that in an urban center, only 38% of people die in hospice or in long-term care, whereas in a rural center, over 70% of people die in a hospital or long-term care, which is not what people want. It's exactly the opposite of what people want. We know that in Ontario, there are currently 280 hospice beds, and only fewer than 10% of those are located in rural areas. So there's a huge disparity for rural residents. The province knows and has a plan to open up to 1,300 hospice beds in Ontario, and that's in accordance with Bill 3, which states every Ontarian has the right to access expert palliative care. And the Bill 3 mandate has to have a plan attached to it by January of 2022. So we know this is on the provincial government's radar. The other thing we know is that the baby boomers have just started to enter the healthcare system, and that the healthcare system is struggling with the increased volumes. We know that palliative care is the second most expensive type of care for a hospital admission. So even in Muskoka, we have data to show that palliative care is expensive. In fact, it's about 50 times more expensive than a hospice bed. So over the next 20 years, the Ontario Medical Association projects that we will have a substantial increase in the number of people who are elderly and at end of life, and that palliative care will be a critical need in the future, and we haven't efficiently planned for it. So Hospice Muskoka, as you know, has submitted a proposal to get an increased number of beds at Andy's house, and to be able to increase our role in the community in a very substantial way. And that's part of the planning, but we know that it won't be sufficient to cover the entire need of our region. So we'll go to the next slide and I'll show you some of the data around those things. So the cost, the average cost to die in a hospital it starts at $1,000 a day. That's a 2016 number, so we know that number is quite a bit higher now. Whereas the average cost to die in a hospice is about $450 a day. And most of that money is subsidized. In fact, 50% of that money is subsidized by donation dollars. So hospices are only funded about 45% for their costs of operating. And operating a hospice includes residential beds and community service. So go to the next slide, please. So Hospice Muskoka has a catchment area that's quite large, all of South and West Muskoka. So we have 2 First Nations communities. We have the town of Bracebridge, Gravenhurst, and Muskoka Lakes. So the bulk of the district's population is served by Hospice Muskoka. The respite beds will serve the entire district of Muskoka because Hospice Huntsville does not have the capacity to add beds at this time. So we do ask for 5 additional beds at Andy's house so that we can bring people in for a 2-week respite, and that will include the Huntsville area populations. We also know that the Ministry of Health looks at our permanent population as our base population for service, but we all know that 50% of the year we have seasonal residents. And those residents access healthcare system just as much as the permanent residents. So we know locally that our numbers need to include the seasonal residents in any kind of proposal that goes forward to the ministry. Next slide, please. So this is a 2016 census data. But it clearly shows that Muskoka is a much older population. That's 25.5% of our population is over 65, whereas in Simcoe, it's only 18% of the population. And in Ontario, over 65 makes up 16.7% of the population. So Muskoka is very much a canary in the coal mine. We're an older population. We need to set the standard. We need to lead the province, so that we have a model for caring for elderly people that is replicable, being able to replicate across rural areas of Ontario. We know that Muskoka is a leader in the healthcare system through the Muskoka and Area Health Team, and that this is part of that leadership strategy that we can set the standard of care for palliative care across Ontario, especially in rural areas. Next slide, please. So 70% of hospitalized Canadians do not want life-prolonging treatments. But despite that, 50% of those people were admitted to the ICU for aggressive therapies. This is a tragedy. This is a tragedy for families. It's a tragedy for individuals who want to be allowed to die. And the tragedy of this is that the healthcare system is very good at prolonging life and saving life, and that's what they're funded to do. The healthcare system is not the place to die. A hospice is the place to die. Home is the place to die. And we need to be able to provide those services to our residents as a quality of life issue. Dying with dignity, with peace, with proper pain and symptom management, and with the supports that are needed so that your loved ones can be your loved ones and not your caregivers. The tragedy of this is that we are asking caregivers in the community to provide nursing services when they're not nurses. We are asking them to give narcotics to their loved ones who are dying when they have no education or learning around how to administer or even when to administer those drugs. When we put those drugs in the homes of people who are dying, there's a kit and it comes with a 5x7 sheet of paper that tells you when and how to administer those drugs. That is not appropriate. We know that we have rural residents who are heating their homes with wood. They're elderly. They're caring for someone who's dying, who they love, and they're making decisions. And then they're carrying the guilt for feeling that they may not have made the right decision. We know that we don't have home and community care supports in place to help them. And hospice is well positioned to be able to grow our community service programs so that we can go into the communities, we can help the caregivers, we can teach them and educate them about how to provide care, but we can give them a break as well. They're going days without proper sleep. They're not getting socialized. They're not getting food. They're isolated. And in the winter, it's even worse. So we know these are issues in our area. Hospice is positioned to address them. Respite beds will help bring people into the hospice for 2 weeks and give their caregivers a holiday, a much needed holiday. Dying takes time. And especially when it's done well, it needs to be done with dignity. We need to let people love their family members and not be their caregivers. Next slide, please. So as an overview, baby boomers are just starting to enter the system. And they're already stressing the system. So we know that the healthcare system is not able to cope. This pressure is expected to continue for the next 10 to 20 years. We know that the healthcare system is at least 50% more expensive than the hospice system at end of life. We know that the home and community care system is not meeting the needs of palliative patients in our communities because they have lack of human resources. And an interesting point here is that Andy's house opened 1 year ago. We have not lost staff. We do not have a human health resource issue. Our nurses and PSWs come to this job because this is their calling. This is what they love to do. And we have not had a turnover in staff, which is an exception in the rest of Muskoka. We know that Muskokans are older than the average Ontario population. And we know that when people are dying, they want comfort measures. They do not want to end up in the ICU or in the hospital. Hospice beds free up acute care settings. And they also reduce the number of emergency room visits at end of life because we're with the caregivers, helping them and teaching them how to provide the adequate care that their loved one needs. And we represent a considerable cost avoidance to the healthcare system. So, right now with 3 beds, our annual budget is $1 million to provide our hospice and community services. When we get the 8 beds funded, which we hope will happen, our budget goes to $1.3 million. The reason for that is that we provide RN and PSW care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we're paying for those healthcare professionals to be on site, regardless if there's 3 or 8 residents here. So it makes no sense not to be funded fully so that we have 8 beds opened. The 9th bed, we do have a 10-bed capacity here. The 9th bed we've set up as a pediatric bed. We know that children also die in Muskoka, and currently when children die in Muskoka, their families are forced to relocate to Toronto. They lose their support systems. They're living in a hotel and driving to the hospital every day to be with their child. Sick Kids Hospital has agreed to work with Hospice Muskoka to be available to us 24/7 to provide care in this community at Andy's house for children who die in this community, so that the families can stay close and be exposed to their support systems. And then the 10th bedroom that we have at Andy's house is set up as the guest room, because we also know that it's highly unaffordable most of the time to get a hotel room locally, or they're unavailable. So we have a guest room so that people that come to be with a loved one at the end of life can either stay in their bedroom with them or sleep in the guest room if that's what they prefer. So that's why we're only asking for 8 beds, even though we have 10. So next slide, please. So right now, as you know, we have funding for 3 end-of-life beds. And end-of-life beds means that people come into those beds who have less than 3 months of life remaining. We have an occupancy rate of 96%. We typically have about a dozen people on our wait list to get one of the beds. And the tragedy is that there are people waiting and that never come into the house. So they're dying at home with inadequate services. We are the first nurse practitioner-led hospice with MRP designation, and that means most responsible provider. So how this works, I guess the reason for this is that we had no local physicians who were available to provide palliative care or end-of-life care at Andy's house. So I've been a nurse practitioner for 20 years, was asked by Sandra Winspear, the former executive director, if I would take this role as MRP, which I gladly did. This is an honor, the most precious point of life, and I'm happy to be here to work in this role. And MRP is the most responsible provider, the most responsible prescriber. So when people come into Andy's house, they continue to keep their primary care provider, whom they've had a long-term relationship with, and we feel it's not fair for them at the end of life to change their relationship with their primary care provider. But we have an agreement with the primary care providers that palliative care is a specialty. We use medications here that are not typically used in primary care. And we know when and how much and how to use them. We use pain pumps here that is never used in primary care. So a lot of the family doctors and family nurse practitioners have agreed that when one of their patients come into Andy's house, they'll come under my care. And I continue to let their primary care provider know what's happening with them at all times. So we share the electronic medical record. We have a multidisciplinary team that's specialized in palliative and end-of-life care. We have a social worker attached to Hospice Muskoka, who is the only social worker in Muskoka who has a palliative care specialty. She also has a pediatric palliative care specialty. So she does a lot of our complex palliative care counseling with local people in Muskoka, in our catchment area. And then we have a team of volunteers who have also been educated to do palliative care support. And so the social worker takes the complex cases and our team of volunteers take the more predictable types of grief and bereavement cases. Next slide, please. So like I said, we have a clinical team working in-house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The social worker and the nurse practitioner, which is me, in the house 5 days a week. I'm on call to the house 24/7. And the reason for that is things change quickly with our residents. And we like to be responsive so that there is no pain and suffering at end of life. So I have agreed to do that, and eventually the NP role will be a full-time role where we're adding more community services and pain and symptom management clinics in the community. So that is our one of our plans for future. Next slide, please. So we have a volunteer team, and currently we have about 50 volunteers attached to Andy's house. These are some of the areas they work in, so it's quite a diverse complement that they add to the Hospice Muskoka services. The advanced care planning piece is something that we're really excited about. And what that does is gets Hospice Muskoka volunteers who are trained and educated in advanced care planning in the family doctor's offices, so that when somebody who is diagnosed with a life-limiting illness can become attached to hospice at the time of diagnosis, we can support them throughout their journey and get them the support and the right type of symptom management and treatments that they need. We hope that in the future, Hospice Muskoka will also provide the nursing and PSW care in the community. And that's something that we are going to be working toward in the future. We see the next 5 years as a very rapid growth for our services and want to make sure that we are ahead of the curve so we can set the standard for the province. Home respite is where the volunteers will go into a person's house and sit with them while their caregiver has a nap or goes for groceries or has some social time or private time, maybe even going to their own health practitioners for service. Grief and bereavement is huge. They say that COVID pandemic was the first pandemic. The second pandemic will be grief and bereavement. We have people who have lost loved ones in our community who have never had the ceremonies that are traditionally done. We have people who are feeling isolated, unsupported. We know that there's financial challenges, health challenges, employment challenges, on and on. And grief and bereavement is going to be massive. In fact, Hospice Palliative Care Ontario has asked for $22 million to support hospices in meeting the need in the future. Caregiver support is where our volunteers will go in. They'll teach the caregivers how to care for their loved one more efficiently, in a more sustainable way. They'll help them with some light housekeeping, maybe some food preparation, anything that is needed, they'll be able to assist with. And then at Andy's house, we have a full complement of volunteers that help support our operation here. We have 4 paid clinical staff who are not, 4 paid administrative staff who are not clinical. The rest of our staff, 15, are clinical. So all of our costs are based on direct care delivery, really. Next slide, please. We have some really exciting external partnerships, and this is a first for any hospice in Ontario, where we are so integrated with the local health system. We sit as an alliance member at the Muskoka and area Ontario Health Team, which is the new term for the former LIN. It is the funding table for Muskoka Health Services, and we are sitting as an alliance member, which means we're at the head of the table with the hospital, with the family health teams, with community mental health. And that's because local practitioners, local health system leaders know that palliative care is a tsunami that's coming toward us, and we need to be ready, and we aren't ready now. So hospice has been invited to that table, and we're excited to be there.
Yeah, Donna, if I might just interrupt, thank you so much for this incredible, sobering presentation. I don't want to cut you off. I certainly am not going to. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to wrap up, if you'd be so kind, and then we'll have a few questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So the other memberships, we are, just to say that we are really woven into the fabric of the local and the regional health systems. We are seen as a leader in hospice care circles, and we hope to continue that through our growth plan. Next slide, please. So the palliative respite beds, definitely our next priority. We need funding for those 5 beds so we can get people in. We had really wanted those beds open before the winter. We know the winter is really hard on people who are dying at home. and we needed to be able to get those people into the house for a respite over the winter. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. That's where I really need local help to get this pushed across the table at the ministry level. Pain and symptom management clinics, we see a plan where we have satellites in Bracebridge and Gravenhurst at the family health teams, where we can bring people in for specific palliative pain and symptom management. And that would be a full-time nurse practitioner who would go to each of the sites to do clinics with people. And then we see expanding our social work team and having a larger multidisciplinary palliative and end-of-life team for the entire region of our catchment area. Next slide, please. So we've been asking local residents that if they know of someone who is palliative and would benefit from respite beds, if they could please write to our representatives, our provincial representatives, and ask that Andy's house be funded for an additional 5 beds, that this is a priority issue. And I'm not sure how many letters have gone out yet, but we are putting this out there on Facebook and however we can, so we can get people to write. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Donna, thank you. Thank you so much. You're such a professional. I think we're so lucky to have you amongst us, ministering to the folks as you do. What a topic. So I'm going to, I know as a township, here we are. I know that both the mayor and our, we have some district councilor representation who can really speak to this topic more than some others, but this has been enlightening for all. And I so appreciate on behalf of this committee, your great words. I would ask the mayor, he's got his hand up. Mayor Harding, go ahead. And then Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you very much, Chair Zavitz, and good morning, Donna. Welcome. Obviously, we're going to do what we can. As it was probably a month and a half ago now, I think we visited with Mr. Tabolo at Hospice, Andy's house in Port Carling. I will take it upon myself to follow up with the minister as to what's going on, because my discussions with him at that time was he saw it as what he called almost low-hanging fruit, that there was an opportunity to be able to fund these additional beds. So my apologies for not following up sooner on that, but we will certainly do so. As you know, I mean, Norm Miller is still our MPP. We have a new MPP who hopefully will be elected come June, who's also very well versed in all things healthcare and provincial. So leave it with us to continue to push on your behalf. The other thing I think that's appropriate, and I'm happy to try and get a delegation with our CAO at the upcoming Roma conference in January to try and meet to continue added funding for this particular project. So obviously an amazing facility for those councillors who haven't had an opportunity. Please reach out to Donna. The facility is spectacular. Yes, you'll get a rapid test as you walk in there, which is just fine. And but anyway, thank you for your continued support of our aging population. And thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much. Good words. Councilor Nishikawa, from your perspective, and then Councilor Bridgman. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Donna. Mostly I was going to say, and the mayor had said it, that at this point, we would require the mayor to get on it kind of thing and send out those letters. And certainly health services are doing that at the district level.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bridgman.
Thank you, Chair Zavitz. Donna, I would be remiss if I didn't suggest that perhaps you let us all know what the fundraising is right now for Andy's house, the match in dollars and the Christmas baskets, because I suspect many of our residents don't have any idea of that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bridgman. We do have a matching. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. We do have a matching campaign going on right now. The Friends of the Andy Potts Memorial Foundation have agreed to match every dollar up to $50,000 throughout the month of November. So every dollar that's donated is matched up to 50. And that $100,000 that we raise will be used to purchase the 5 beds that will go into the respite rooms. So 5 beds cost $100,000, unfortunately. The Christmas hampers and our fundraising event that we are selling 100 hampers, homemade goodies, a nice gift basket for somebody, $150 each, and they are available to be reserved online and then picked up at Andy's house if you're interested in those. And we do have ongoing Christmas campaign, the end of year donation campaigns as well. So,
Good.
thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. And again, there's the operative word right now. I think as we move on, Donna, we all want to thank you for your, not only your service, but your professionalism. I don't know if you realize it, but you had that presentation of yours, you didn't miss a word. You're so convicted. You're so amazing at what you do. Thank you. Wow. I know it's it's close to a lot of people, and it's a topic that we need to pay a lot of attention to. And I think through your presence and your certainly your efforts, we're going to do that. The mayor said some good things there, and let's support the mayor in that initiative to support you. So thank you for that. Have a great day, and I appreciate your time with us today.
Glenn?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Glenn? Glenn?
Sorry, is this Alan?
Yes, it is.
Alan, go ahead, sir.
Hey, thank you very much. Sorry, Donna, I missed that presentation. I'm on the phone. I heard some of it. Could you send me that? I would really appreciate it. And you know you've got my support.
Thank you, Alan. Excellent. Good. She's nodding yes. Can you see? You can't see us. Okay, good. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair.
Great. Okay, Donna, have a nice day. Thank you so much. Cheers. Okay, item 4C. We're going to now call on the board chair of the Muskoka Lakes Public Library, Valerie Duke, and Cathy Duck, the CAO and Chief Librarian, for a library update. Are you folks here right now? There's Valerie Duke. Valerie, are you going to be doing the presentation? Is Cathy joining us, or it's all you? Okay. Is your audio working? Val, can you hear us? Val, could you unmute, please, if you're... We don't have a connection here.
I
Val?
think I can hear you, Chair Zavitz. Are you there?
Okay, we can hear you now. Thank you so much. Welcome. Welcome. And there's your first slide. Go ahead.
Oh, perfect. If we can just put it up into slideshow view would be great.
Okay, we're attempting to do that.
Okay.
You go you go ahead and we'll
Okay. All right.
thank you, Val.
It was just a bit, yep, that's great. It was a bit tiny on my screen. I just wanted to thank you all very much, Chair Zavitz, and
Val,
for
I'm
everyone.
sorry, Val, sorry. I'm so sorry. We've lost your slide, and now we're attempting to let Councillor Edwards in I think they found a way to get him in.
Okay.
And then, I'm sorry, and then we'll get your slides up, and it's the fullest of format, so that, sorry, Val, so just, does anybody remember slides? Wow. Okay, we'll be there in just a minute, Val. Sorry.
Absolutely.
I know you're ready to go. Cathy, welcome.
Good morning.
Okay, there we go. Are we going to expand that screen? Okay, let me.
You need tech support, I can grab a hammer and come right over.
Why don't you just come over? Why don't you just... Wow, okay. Okay, why don't we just go on just based on that, or?
That's perfect.
Okay, I'm gonna invite you, Val, to please, you have the floor. We'll try not to lose that screen. We'll only try to enhance it. So please go ahead. Okay, welcome. Welcome, you have the floor.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair Zavitz. As Chair Zavitz had said, my name is Valerie Duke. I am the board chair of the Muskoka Lakes Public Library Board, and we've got Cathy Duck here with us as well, who is our amazing CEO. So I just wanted to, I know your time is valuable, so I'll try to stick to your time limits here, and I'll be mindful of the time. And we're always excited to have an opportunity to come in and present to the township and to all of the residents about the exciting initiatives we have set at the library and everything that we're doing, all of our activities. So again, thank you very much for having us and allowing us this opportunity. So we'll just jump right into the very first slide there. And again, like every good library, there's a, it's full of great stories, and our COVID story and our COVID library response is absolutely a story that we've been working through for the last 18 months. I think we honestly thought this story was going to be a very short story, and it's turned out to be more of a trilogy. And I think the fourth book is still being written. So again, we are just gonna, I'm not gonna go through every point here, but again, back in spring of 2020, we saw that our library closed on March 14th. And we've, again, based on that COVID response and closing the library, of course, it impacted everybody's businesses along with ourselves, with the decrease in expenses due to staff being, not working as many hours and all that. We also saw decreases in revenue, membership, and all of that. However, the silver lining of COVID also allowed us to, look at the way we operate and look at the way we engage our community and explore different opportunities. So I think that was really important to note, that we've certainly taken it upon ourselves to make sure that at every opportunity, we're still right there with our community, right there supporting all of our membership and all of our community members. Next slide, please. And as soon as we were, able to, and the provincial mandates allowed, we started our outdoor pickup of library items. This picture is just a picture of one of our staff members, Nancy, who does an amazing job with us. And it was the first outdoor library pickup, where again, this was before even masks were, mandatory to be utilized. So again, it was, leave the items on a desk, step back, have others come in, pick it up. But again, showing that we were supporting our members at every opportunity. They may not have been able to come into the library, but we started outdoor pickup right away. Next slide, please. A couple of things to just note here. In the summer of 2020, we started, again, building alternate ways to engage with the community that may have not otherwise been explored. So we upped our monthly library newsletters, our social media presence for engagement and notices. Again, opportunities for books being offered for sale outside a lot, because we weren't having people coming in to be able to browse. Donations of books were available to the public's reading access outside through donation only. We had interactive displays mounted on library windows. The Port Carlin Community Center has a great big billboard that we played interactive games with families. Again, just another, COVID allowed us to explore all sorts of wonderful ways to engage with our community that will be long going for us. I mean, in the long term, they're great opportunities and new avenues that we were able to pursue. The story trails were interactive story trails that we installed in both Bala and Port Carling, again, allowing families to understand that the library is still performing outreach and getting out there in the community through these interactive story walks. Hopefully some of you were able to take part in those in the summer of 2020, and we also did them this year as well. Next slide, please. And again, this is just a picture of the books for sale by donation and a family coming by. And again, the books for sale by donation was actually a great revenue source for us as well. They weren't marked, they were by donation only. People understood that they weren't able to come in and access our full catalog, but had a great opportunity to go through these books and donate their dollars to the library and support us through our time of closure. Next slide, please. Again, the COVID library response, November 3rd, we were reopened in November of 2020 back to in-library browsing, and our Bala branch was able to open for outside of delivery items. Again, the Bala residents were very excited and happy to be able to go back and start doing pickup as well. Next slide, please. One thing that we did notice that was just vital in our initiatives with the library is outreach. And one of our outreach, we always had great in-house programming, seniors programming for members in the community. And one of the most important things that we really found that was the outreach for seniors was really important. We did have a brief interlude there where we were able to gather in a social setting, and Kathy and her staff took it upon themselves to organize a seniors event at Hannah Park, actually, so we could have the correct, social distancing put in place. And I know that all of the seniors, based on the outcome, were appreciative of that outreach. So look forward to being able to see one another together again and participate in such an event as a coffee break for seniors. Next slide, please. Going into winter and spring of 2021, we started to see some semblance of normalcy cropping up. We were able to, although our doors were once closed again for provincial mandates, we were still able to do outside delivery of library items. We were able to do online delivery of children's programming. We have other programming such as clubs, such as the Mahjong Club every Monday morning. So again, a lot of opportunities for people to engage and participate online. Again, with the social media presence that we have with a lot of subscribers, we were able to sort of connect with a lot of users and let them know of upcoming initiatives. One of the great resources was that we were doing local author events, which was amazing. And we were able to showcase a couple of local authors that we have right here in-house. Kim Alexander is one of our board members and has published a book and was able to participate in that, along with Susan Nairn, who is again another local artist, along with other best-selling authors. So people were available to take part in Zoom calls in the evenings. Again, with the COVID restraints, we're able to sort of have these Zoom calls and Zoom participation in off hours of the library as well. So in the evenings, we would participate in these author visits, which were very well received, very well attended. And certainly if you haven't had a chance to attend one, it's like an online book club. So it's just been an amazing initiative. We also always had the grab and go or take and make arts and crafts, which again was an initiative where kids, families, people can stop by, and there was kits made available to people to take home and make. Again, we always encourage people to post their end results, and we've been able to have that on our website and social media platforms of people getting together. They're spending more time at home anyways, and now we've provided them some opportunities to craft and spend time together as a family. Next slide, please. And again, this is just an example of one of our take and make kits. I think it's a little owl there that, again, a paper mache owl. The people can simply come by the library. There's always some type of offering available that you can take home, take and make and enjoy and spend time with the family. Next slide, please. And summer and fall of 2021, again, our library was able to reopen We've got no appointments necessary at this time, as it was in Port Carling in library browsing as of July 13th, with capacity and time limits. Our seniors were all called as an outreach initiative to let them know. Some people may not have internet access. So again, we were reaching out to everybody available to let them know of any changes to the library services and welcome everybody back. Again, the Bala branch did open for in-library browsing as of August 3rd. And again, very well received. People missed us and we missed them. So it was really, really great to be able to open and have both of our branches open and welcoming to everybody. We also held a vaccine clinic in the Port Carling branch in October. And just some stats that over 1,250 people entered the library during August. Again, library washrooms were made available to the public. Again, servicing our community for tourists, visitors, seasonal members, and local members alike. Next. And this slide is just actually one of the story trails down at Hannah Park, I believe, and they're very interactive. I know my daughter and I and my husband had a lot of fun going from, it was an interactive story where you had to find something on the next page. So again, it became quite fun to, get to that next page of the story. And again, we're very well received. People love to be able to have that opportunity to be reminded of what the library has to offer. Next slide. We'll just get into a little bit of stats here. Just membership and circulation. Again, with the closure of doors and people, spending more time at home, working from home, being busy. We did see some decreases in circulation, of course, based on not being able to come in and browse and pick your 10 books to take them home. But we did certainly make online membership account sign up a lot easier. So that was one initiative that Kathy and her staff took upon and worked very well. So we had 118 new accounts throughout this process. And these are year-to-date numbers, not full 2021 numbers. We had an increase in our ebooks and movies that are downloaded. Again, a lot of people were moving over to the online version of books and movies as they weren't always able to come in and grab those items and peruse the selection and the full catalog. And 17,000 plus physical items checked out of the library. So again, when you look at COVID closures, very proud that we did have quite good circulation numbers, considering a lot of that time they weren't able to come in and get all of their items in hand. Next slide. Almost done here. Sorry about the time. So programs and activities, we're still, even though we weren't able to offer in-house programming, we were able to offer programs online and also engage all of that community members in an online environment, offering children's programs, mahjong programs, author night events, etc. We had our story trails, we had our grab and go, take and make kits, and positivity packs. Next slide. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't, make sure that we were acknowledging the ongoing support of our friends. The Friends of the Library constantly support us. It's consistent. They are just an amazing group of volunteers, and they help do fundraising and fund a lot of the library initiatives. Some of the library initiatives this year were the installation and procurement of a water bottle refill station, which is housed on the lower level and is a great addition to our library. They assisted in over $3,000 for the story trail frames, books, lamination, and supplies. And as my daughter said, we've got merchandise now. We've got merch at the Muskoka Lakes Public Library. And so if you haven't seen it, please stop by. We've got some beautiful tote bags for library book bags. Again, they're not $1,000 per book bag, but the Friends of the Library supported us in procuring $1,000 worth of these book bags. And their constant and consistent dedication and hard work is just so appreciated by staff, the board, and all of the community. So thank you to all of our Friends of the Library. And next slide, please. And, most recent news and most exciting news, again, silver lining of COVID, we were able to, on September 25th, the Muskoka Lakes Public Library received official status as an accredited public library of Ontario. Just to give you some stats on that, 41 libraries have accreditation status out of over 265 libraries in Ontario. So again, it's a 5-year term. The staff and prior board, current board has been working on this initiative for a number of years now. And again, with some of our COVID closures, allowed us to refocus and spend a bit of time working on the accreditation. And it was really a high volume of policy development, the compilation of data, process, the review of all of our process and planning. So again, it was a large scale initiative, but Cathy acting as CEO and being our leader and under the direction of her, we were able to have this official status, which is just an amazing opportunity. So, just the key benefits of accreditation is just the local library service is the evaluation of local library service and direction for development. There's improved accountability and consistency of public library service across Ontario. There's assistance for accredited libraries in planning processes. And again, it enhances the library's position in the community with any funding bodies. So congratulations to all that worked on that. I know everybody had a hand in it, from past and present board members in policy creation, Cathy and all of her staff, and everybody just took part in that. So again, thank you all for that. Next slide, please. And that's essentially it. I just wanted to, again, thank the Township of Muskoka Lakes for their ongoing support, all of the members of the community for continuously supporting all of our library initiatives, staying engaged with us throughout all of these trying times. And we just really wanted to recognize the support of Township, and that, it is a, essential hub and community hub that is so very important to so many individuals in the community. So again, thank you for all of your support as well.
I'm muted. Listen, thank you, Val, for that wonderful presentation. And thank you for your involvement, Cathy, of course. This is a story of continuous improvement, if there ever was one. I must say it was heartwarming to go to the accreditation ceremony and actually be in the midst of Pat Gidley, a past chair, Donalda Hayes here with us today, a past chair, and Val as the current chair. What a group, a tremendous community involvement and sensitivity. So, thank you. And, we will continue to support our library, and I think you'll see the fruits of that over the next days and weeks. So as we get to budget, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Zavitz and everybody.
Wonderful. I might ask if committee has any thoughts. Please share them if you would. Everybody's got a thumbs up there. Okay, good. We'll move on. Thank you. Have a great day. Cheers. Okay, committee, we're going to move to item 6A. We'll move that agenda around. Beg the indulgence of Director Becking, if we might, on his involvement for the moment, where we'll go to item 6A. We have our IT consultant still with us, Ian Shelley. So we would go to item 6A, which is a report from our director, Mark Donaldson of Financial Services, re the IT strategic plan. So Mark, if you would proceed, sir, then we'll likely break at 10:30 as we do. So thank you, Mark. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And when Mr. Shelley was introduced at the beginning of the meeting, I think I had summarized to the report that's submitted to committee this morning with respect to the IT strategic plan. It is a high-level plan that kind of outlines the steps that are seen to be areas of needs of attention for the current infrastructure that we have in place, both hardware and software. And the follow-up to this report today will be an implementation plan that will be brought forward early next year to discuss what steps, the when, the how, and the how much that will help inform how we move forward with our IT support and our IT infrastructure and systems of the township at this time. So I think with that, I will leave it open to committee if there are any questions with respect to the draft report that's before you, or that either myself or Mr. Shelley can address to your satisfaction. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, and I just might add, as I look for the show of hands, if anybody would like to provide comment while Ian's here. And I guess might direct this to the mayor. Sir, we've been talking, I've been hearing for quite some time, an alliance with Huntsville, I believe it is, in terms of IT, and perhaps maybe it isn't directed to you, perhaps it's directed back to Mark, as it relates to what does that mean in terms of this mix?
Happy to comment, Mr. Chair. I think the reality, and Mr. Donaldson can probably comment, or Andy, or even our CIO, I think the reality is we certainly need to move forward with this RFP. If it ends up with a joint submission, or they're doing the same thing, and there's economies of scales that can be gained, but I think we need to look after ourselves first of all, and then looking forward, is there something to be done with Huntsville or somebody else accordingly? I'll turn it over to Mr. Donaldson for comment at that point.
Okay, thank you, sir, for that. Mark, do you have any? Otherwise, I'll go right to Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I will just make one comment. So committee would be aware of a joint proposal that the town of Huntsville and the township of Muskoka Lakes put forward for the municipal modernization program, intake 2, and that was a joint proposal to replace our financial system. The replacement of our financial system is one of the recommendations in this report. Our current system is about 13 years old. It is a bit antiquated and not well supported in terms of the vendor. I mean, I think then software changes so quickly and so rapidly that they move on to other products. So I think that may be one of the things that may be coming to mind with respect to Huntsville. But certainly, I think wherever there are partnerships or ability to leverage relationships, we would certainly want to look at those and try to capitalize on any economies of scale that we can achieve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to call on Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Hayes. Councillor Roberts, you go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. And I start off by commenting that this is it appears to me to be the most comprehensive report this council has received in the 3 years that I've been receiving it. It was absolutely chock full of actionable or items that must be addressed. Jumping out of the report, I listed 20 mandatory, must be looked at ASAP items, which don't include any of the application improvements. The 20 I listed, I could list or whatever, are all risk threats that we as a township need to address right away. And I think engaging a service provider is important, but I think the most important thing we need, this report explains loud and clear that we do not have a mature IT policy or procedures or whatever that we need to get in place. We must include in the 2022 budget, because everything in there is not going to be cheap. There might be some small things, but the big things are going to be expensive. And what we need to do is to engage an industry leader to take this on. This industry leader will report directly to the CAO, not to a department head, which becomes a silo. So he or she would report directly to the CAO to take this report and to prioritize the items that have to be done, that have to be actioned right away, early in 2022, and then implement that prioritized document. It should not come back to council. We do not come back to council on Public Works to discuss an implementation plan that Director Becking has for roads and that. So this needs to be funded soon, 2022, or we're at risk of losing possibly losing much of our IT functionality. So that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, because Mark, or thank you for that, because Ian is here, I wonder, I hate to use the word severity, but I think, Ian, what I'm hearing from committee member Roberts is, you know, how bad is it? I mean, I understand that we need to fund it, and we, you know, going forward, I think we have a lot of consensus on that piece. Obviously, a concern. Can you speak to that with your credentials in terms of where, you know, how compromised are we as a township?
So the first thing I'd like to say, and Councillor Roberts has used the word already, these are risk items. And when it comes to IT, it's about money. You want less risk, you spend more money. And particularly when it comes to security, if you want higher security, you spend more money. And so what yourselves and the leadership team at the township are tasked with IT is determining your risk tolerance. And what I've tried to do in this report is expose many of the risks you face so that you can have that conversation. Are we tolerant of this risk or not? I think the biggest problem you faced in the past is no one's presented you with the risk base and said, are you happy with these risks or not, council? And I use the example of firewalls, and you know, they're an absolutely essential piece of IT equipment that puts a block between the outside world and the inside network. You have one of them. That's okay. Many organizations would have two side by side because they feel that's less risky. That's an economic decision. And so what we've put forward for you is many items, and we've tried to expose what the risk is. One example I'd like to put forward is the disaster recovery situation. You are doing backups. That's great. But no one is looking at, well, if we had a large outage, if we had a fire in the computer room, how would we get working again? So that's an item where I'd say, you now know that you do not have this, and you know that the implication is if there's a fire, we're out for a week to 2 weeks on our systems. The question now is, are we accepting that risk or not? And if the answer is no, then that needs to be funded, and we need a disaster recovery plan, and we need an approach to getting some equipment offsite. So that's the problem that faces sort of management and council now, is where is our risk level? Where are we accepting of this now that we've exposed many of the risks you face? Going back directly to your question, Councillor Zavitz, I'd say the network, the disaster recovery, there's some of the foundational elements that I'd say today, get them in place. I'd also say, as we talked earlier, get in place this cyber response plan, even a penetration test. Where we don't do the technical penetration testing, I'd say there are some of the elements that you should just go ahead and do. Some of the other items, like replacement of the finance system, they're business case based decisions. Are we going to be better off afterwards? I would argue yes, but that should go through a formal decision making process. So I think there's a lot in there to work with, and as Mr. Donaldson has indicated, he's going to be working on the implementation plan to sequence them and come back and say that's the cost of it. And at that point, you're really going to be challenged with, is that an acceptable cost for us to fix up this environment? Yeah. The final piece that I'd really sort of endorse is around the internal knowledge and having somebody in there who you would consider a professional in IT. I think the staff have done the best efforts so far with their knowledge to work with the service provider, but you cannot abdicate responsibility. There's got to be some knowledgeable person in there. That's where the buck stops. And I think those items for me are probably the critical ones. And again, as Councillor Roberts highlighted, they're the less sexy items here. These are the things that are working in the background. You know, I really prefer to say to organizations, lead with the service side of things and bring the infrastructure in behind it. I think you've got some critical items that have to come first, but I'd love to see that agenda not be lost around improving online service delivery, patching up some of the gaps for staff and the systems they use as well.
Good. Thank you. Excellent insight. Wow. I'm going to call on Councillor Hayes and Councillor Bridgman, then we'll let Ian get on with his day. Thank you. Councillor Hayes, go ahead.
Thank you. And through you, just to let Ian know, sitting on council, you have over 100 years of IT hardware and software experience. So you will probably hear a lot of comments. Disaster recovery is something that we think in the abstract. I will tell you that Lake of Bays has incurred 2 disaster recoveries. Their first recovery was over 2 weeks to be back up and running 100%. Their second disaster recovery, which was 2 years later, took 2 days. So it is something that you learn from your experiences, but it is something that you really should have first and foremost on your plan. Cybersecurity has come a long way, and it would not hurt. I don't know what expertise Mr. Shelley's company has, but it would not hurt to have a cybersecurity expert review our plan once we have it in action. The third thing that I want to touch on is the software. I think what I will do is I'll keep it at a high level and send my notes to Mark. Conversion paths do not always run easily. That's something to consider when you're looking at a new system. Something with a really great GL does not mean that your IT or your MAM will interface. Payroll and HR have historically had not great handshaking. And when a vendor tells you that they can interface, that means that they can output data for somebody else to read in. That does not mean that it is going to automatically go into another system. And watch for underlying costs because your operating system, I know some of the high-end systems run on an Oracle base, which is another thousands of dollars to maintain that. And I would say probably the most important thing in looking at your systems is research who's running them and have people in your office, the tax clerk talk to the tax clerk, GL talk to GL, AP talk to AP. You'll find out a whole lot of information on how well and how poorly the system runs.
Sage words. Thank you very much. Based on experience. Okay, Councilor Bridgman. Barb, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Zavitz. Mr. Shelley, I have a couple of comments. The first one following on Councillor Roberts is we are at risk of ransomware attack for, as I can read this, seriously at risk of that. So I think we need to deal with that immediately, and we probably need to bring somebody on board immediately, as you said, in terms of IT expertise. So I don't think now that it's out there that we don't have much security, that we don't have an option except to fix that. So that would be my first comment, and that's not the 2023 budget. That would be the 2022 budget that we have to put some money into. My second question, actually, having sort of been part of this in my working world, was what iCloud application do you use when you're talking about your clients' secure information? And I think I read from this report that we are housed in the UK on some of our applications. And my question to you is that of all of our personnel information, like our private people who work for us, is that housed in the UK? Because if it is, they have complete access to all of our information because we're under their laws. So please help me with that.
So the short answer is no personnel data is on that system. And that's been a decision that was made in discussion with your service provider and the HR staff, is they have made that decision for the reason that you've highlighted. It's a conversation that should be had internally, again, going back to the discussion on risk tolerance of what risks you are willing to accept and not accept. So there's been a long discussion over the US and the Patriot Act over having data in the US and the US government having free access to it. The UK doesn't have similar legislation, but it's a discussion that the council should be aware of when these decisions are made. So right now, to reassure you, there is no personnel data, as I understand it, on that system.
Thank you. One follow-up, Chair Zavitz. Just to highlight also, Councillor Hayes, we need to put in place immediately a disaster recovery program. The 7 to 10 days, and my understanding from other companies is they think they got it all right. And the first time through that disaster recovery, they're hitting all kinds of more roadblocks. So I think you double or triple the time that has been stated in this report. So that is absolutely mandatory in my mind. Thanks.
Thank you, Committee Member Bridgman. Councilor Mazan, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, and through you, a question and then a comment, if I may. I just wanted clarification from Mr. Shelley. I think I heard you say, as you were going through the priorities, certainly when reading this report, there was a lot of alarm bells that went off that you, I think, have succinctly put in categories for me. That there are the risk management, there is a back end infrastructure pieces that we do need to look at. And I tried to write down the ones that you had commented on, the disaster recovery, cyber plan, internal knowledge, but then separate from that are the apps, the business case models I think you were talking about, the things that interface with our clients that make us seem, not make us seem, that help us run our business and day-to-day business more effectively. What I think I heard you say is that you said typically you would suggest that we lead with these service delivery apps and then have the infrastructure follow behind. Is that what I heard you say?
So this within this discussion, there's best practice and personal preference. And what I find with municipalities particularly is that the infrastructure is the go-to location and they never get round to improving the applications. So I tend to say, package these together, find an improvement, whether that's taking a service online, whether it's adding automation within the internal processes, and add the infrastructure into that project so you're delivering them together. That's my preference, because then you're improving service delivery and there's a real impact. All too often you see municipalities will put together a 2-year plan of putting the infrastructure in place, and then they'll go back and say, okay, what business systems are we going to change now? And I think my personal preference is to make those in packages so that there's a business improvement along with an infrastructure investment, not a big infrastructure investment, and then we think about the business improvement.
Supplementary, if I may, it is the recommendation then that in this implementation plan so for example, if you're staff would have a specific item, i.e. Mr. Donaldson was talking about the financial piece, and that would be dovetailed into whatever the infrastructure, the in behind the scenes tool that would then be able to help all departments. Is that correct? You use the service need to get to the technology. I just wanted to be sure I was clear on that understanding.
That's my absolute preference.
Okay.
Now there's a couple of items I've talked about that I think you have to move on regardless, like the disaster recovery plan, the broadband connectivity to the extent you can. But the finance system is a great example. That might be something that you say, okay, once we bring this on board, this is our opportunity to get all of our server operating systems current. And there is a plan for that to happen. I think it's in 2023, but you might package that together and say, there you go, that's the infrastructure change we're going to marry with that. Maybe it's the broadband connection. If this finance system ends up being in the cloud, maybe that's the trigger to say we absolutely have to get the broadband connection now because we want to bring on this finance system. So that's my absolute preference in doing this.
Okay, thank you on that. And I think what as I read this report and I've been listening to some of my colleagues today, we are currently going through our budget process. I think that this is an area that needs to be contemplated further. Thank you. And I'm not sure directionally to staff what that means. So Chair Dubsavitz, I'll let you determine next steps there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I guess I would pose a question to Mark as I wrap this up. And with Ian sitting right here with us, what is the scope of what you don't know? I have a resolution here to read, of course, and it does two things. It certainly, first of all, accepts the report is submitted, the IT report is submitted, and then it also directs staff towards an implementation plan. Mark, I might to you, sir. Are you? How far does Ian go with us on this? Is Ian done as a result of bringing to us this report? And if that is the case, well, I'll let you answer that question, I suppose.
Thank you, Chair Dubsavitz. So the engagement we have with Blackline is to produce a strategic plan with recommendations, and the scope within the municipal modernization funding is for the third-party assessment process. It's not to do with funding. The funding doesn't support implementation of that plan.
Right. Okay. Well, excellent. Thank you. I think seeing no more questions, I'll read the resolution. I will, though, to thank you, Ian, for your time and involvement today. Thank you so much. Very interesting. Just pre-reading this, yeah, I see Councillor Roberts has his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I'm fully supportive of the first clause of the resolution to support this excellent strategic plan. But the second part, to proceed on implementation plans, I'm not supportive of. I think in the report, I know in the report it says we need to get IT help of an industry expert. And we need to engage that person through a company. I think you're going to be hard pressed to find an individual in Muskoka that can do this. And for that person to take the bull by the horns immediately and prioritize what we have to do, and then do the implementation plan on the prioritized items. So I'd like the resolution reworded on the second part. Thank you.
Okay, and the second part of the resolution does leave it relatively open-ended. It does leave it for our IT contact, who in this case is our Mark Donaldson, our Director of Financial Services. So
I disagree.
not sure. Oh, there, go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. If I could just make a follow-up comment to that. So a month or two ago, Council did approve our release of an RFP. Our current contract with our service provider expires at the end of December. We are going out with an RFP to canvass the market, and the scope to which Mr. Shelley spoke to earlier, the scope of our current agreement is by design limited. The scope of the agreement that we would be going out to market with to secure IT services on a go-forward basis is an expanded scope that includes many of the things that are being addressed in the report in terms of supporting the township with that tier 1 help support, ensuring we have documentation and other such recommendations. So just to, in response to Councillor Roberts' comment, just to ensure that committee is aware that the IT contract service provider we will be going forward with in the new year would cover many of the things that have been identified as gaps to some extent.
Okay, thank you. I would look to committee. I do have the resolution to read. I would look to the committee if there's any appetite for refinement of part 2 of this, which is essentially bringing forward an implementation plan, the scope of which we've just had description by our financial services. So Councillor Bridgman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Zavitz. Just for clarification, so Mark, would that include immediately establishing a disaster recovery program? I'm unclear on when we can, what the process would be to put that in place as fast as we can, because that would be my preference, and we need the IT expertise for that. So maybe you can help me with the process on that.
Go ahead, Mark. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. So through you, Chair. So the expanded scope would include requirement that we would have a disaster recovery plan that is tested. So we would be doing regular backups and regular testing of that upload to ensure that we do have proper backups and proper reinstallation and reimplementation to get us live again should a disaster occur.
Okay. Okay, seeing no other. Sorry, Alan. I'm sorry, Alan. Councillor, are you there? Go ahead.
Yes.
Sir. Go ahead.
Nope, that's fine. I support it.
Okay, good. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the feedback on your phone. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to read this this resolution moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that the General Finance Committee recommend to Township Council that the draft information technology strategic plan from Blackline Consulting be accepted, and that staff be directed to bring forward an implementation plan with estimated costs for the key recommendations of this draft report for consideration. All those in favor?
Yes.
Good, thank you. That's unanimous, that's carried. Thank you, committee, and
Councillor, Chair Zavitz, I did not vote.
I'm sorry, all those, yeah, carried. All those opposed? I'll call that. Thank you. Apologize. Okay, duly noted, just so you know, for the record. Thank you for that. And again, I apologize for the electronic intervention of it all. Okay, I'm going to move along now. I think we're going to call a break if we could. It's 10:35. Let's maybe be back by 10:45, closer to 10:50 perhaps. And we'll be back. And I think we'll maybe let Mark finish up, get him on his day by going right to item 6B, which is a Q3 financial report update. Thank you, committee. Cheers. Okay, welcome back, committee. We'll get going. Getting into that agenda, item 6B. Mark, our Director of Financial Services, Mark Donaldson, is going to give us a 2021 Q3 financial report update. Mark, you go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Committee has been provided with a report for our September 30, 2021 update. In accordance with our policy, we are providing a quarterly update. Just a few quick highlights I would like to make with respect to the report. In Table 1, showing an overview of the financial position at the end of September. You can see that the excess of revenue over expense at Q3 is just a little over $4.5 million, which would be approximately where we would expect to be, with about a $12.6 million taxable assessment. Then our burn rate would be around that $3.5 million per quarter usage. So we are expecting that we will end up in some small surplus at the end of the year at this point. Just to clarify, final tax bills shown in that table are amounts billed at the end of June, but it does not reflect collections. So there are some amounts that would remain outstanding, which are incurring penalties and interest for late amounts. For penalties and interest to the end of September, we are about $500,000 so far. As well, additional revenue is expected in Q4 for supplementary and omit bills that would go out for updated property assessments that MPAC would do based on construction on various properties that would occur. Our non-tax revenue is far ahead of budget. We are over 90% of our budgeted amounts, and that is being led primarily in the areas of building and planning, which are seeing exceptional volumes for the current year. If we move to expenses and just a few thoughts on Table 2. So we do see that salary, wages, and benefits are at about 71% spent, so a little less than 3/4. That would be reflective of position vacancies and some savings on some of the benefit costs that we have incurred to date so far to September. There is some variance that's offsetting between our COVID expense line and our office supplies line. So items that were budgeted as for cleaning, for example, that were included in our office supplies have actually been coded to COVID related expenses. So there is some offset there in terms of variances from budget. We are expecting that road services expenses will ramp up to some extent as we get into Q4 as the snow season starts, and there will be additional expenses there. There isn't a consistency or it isn't a flat incurrence of expense for roads necessarily all throughout the year. There are areas times when there are higher costs than others. If I move to Table 3 with respect to capital, just to flag that we are 85% forecasted to spend our capital budget. So that is a forecast to the end of December based on where we are now and expected Q4 activity. There are some projects that are delayed, so will carry into 2022 that were approved in 2021, such as a vehicle that was planned for the building department, which delivery has been delayed, as I'm sure many are aware. There is a supply chain issue with in some sectors, as well as the forecast for some of the fire costs for the year are also delayed as well. And just a couple of notes on for public works. There were savings below budget for some projects that committee would be aware of with respect to the Portage Street dock, for example. The space optimization plan came in lower. We did have some overages on the Hazelwood Trail project, and Evely Road is higher than what was budgeted in this year's capital, but they are offset by savings on other projects such as Doherty Road and Beatrice Town Line projects this year. Just a note on Table 4 with respect to reserves. So the reserve table is actually reflecting what we've transferred so far from the reserves at the end of Q3. So that would be related to not what we forecast to spend, but what we've actually spent. We transfer money as it actually is incurred. On the community improvement reserve, I just want to flag that the transfer for the SREL money from the tax stabilization is not reflected in this table, but it will be adjusted for year end. So you'll see that balance is only 10,786 at the end of September, but that amount will be transferred by the end of year. All in all, the township is performing well against its budget, and we expect to come in under our expectation, under our budgeted amounts. And I think that I'll stop there, and if there's any questions.
Good, thank you. I'm sure there'll be a few. There's the mayor, Mayor Harding, go ahead, and then Councillor Jaglowitz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Donaldson. Our other tax revenues are reporting penalties and interest, and it's a sizable amount of money. I am aware of one constituent who, unfortunately, through the pandemic was unable to operate, also went through a reassessment of their property, and I know have been speaking with the province about deferring some of those penalties and or interests. The question I ask is, in this number, are they reflected? And I'm, without naming names, I'm pretty sure you are aware of the individual business that we're talking about in trying to help them. Is that recorded in this $500,000? Because I believe there is a possibility that that may not be realized, or it may not be actual revenue. And what does that change our books if that doesn't come in?
Mark?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So there is no provision in the numbers for any relief that you speak of. The bylaw and the Municipal Act doesn't allow me as treasurer to do those types of adjustments. So I don't know the exact number that's due with respect to specific clients, but I can certainly say that we would set up at year end any provision for uncollectible amounts if that were to be the case, if we had evidence that we could demonstrate to our auditors that that in fact is a reasonable measure.
Supplemental, if I may. I guess the question is, we're showing a surplus or projected surplus, assuming that is collected, assuming that is deferred by the province or removed, and potentially we had to follow suit. Does that put us in a negative position, I guess is my question. How does it impact our bottom line?
Mark?
So certainly, I mean, if all penalties and interests were removed, we would certainly be in a much different financial position than we are now. So it would depend on the order of magnitude and what the criteria would be that the province would permit for relief on penalties and interest for certain taxpayers. So I'm not sure of the specifics, and I'm not aware at this time of what that might look like. So it's difficult for me to say with specific. I can just say the 500,000 is certainly material to the financial position of the township, and should that revenue not be able to be realized in the form of collection, that would be very problematic for the township this year.
Okay, thank you. And is that something that might come to be crystallized by the time we next meet as a group for further budget discussions, or is that something that may not happen till later in this year and impact us after we can reload for it?
So certainly, Chair, I would have to do a little more investigation and get more details on that. Probably it would be difficult to come up with something that's crystallized by our next budget meeting, but certainly would need to be resolved as we get into the year end. And by the time we get to final adoption, hopefully we would have clarity on that matter.
Okay, good. So thank you for that. And I'm going to Councillor Jaglowitz. I would ask that as we approach that next budget meeting, which I believe is the 23rd of November, perhaps there's a component where instead of talking in the abstract, we actually perhaps go to closed or whatever it is we need to do in that regard to have a more fulsome discussion about this particular point, and as it may well impact us fiscally as we go forward. So thank you for bringing that up. Hopefully staff has taken that under advisement. Councillor Jaglowitz, you go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And to Mark, thank you for an excellent report. It raised two questions for me in your verbal discussion, you answered both of them. So good report. However, while I was waiting to speak, I listened to the mayor's question, and I'm a bit confused, but I'll ask you a question following on to that. The province may very well do something, but we have to also authorize something. So have we authorized anything that would reduce that situation, or would any that eventuality would have to come forward to council for its approval before it would take place? Would that not be true?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So there are no provisions for any relief on penalties and interest in this update in Q3. And to the best of my knowledge, the information that I have in terms of the content of the bylaw and the Municipal Act would require that some direction would need to come from senior level of government or some other directive, either from there or from council, that would allow some adjustment to be made. But at this point, I'm not aware, and there is no provision in this report.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Okay, so Councillor Jagwitz.
Yeah, I'm sorry about my phone there. I'll go away in a minute. All I want to clarify is a senior level of government can't direct us to do a rebate, can they? Or have I missed something here? If the mayor was saying a senior level of government, the province could tell us we had to break something off. That would concern me.
Questioning. Sorry, Councillor Jagwitz. I mean, the point of the matter is, here we are in a public meeting. We don't even know what we're talking. Some of us don't even know who what the subject matter is. So, and the mayor may want to clarify. So, you go ahead then.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I guess to Councillor Jagwitz as well. It just the simplicity at high level is a commercial business that was unable to operate during COVID. Had significant expenses that have continued on over the past number of years. We reassessed the individual, the business, because of some development that transpired on the property, has resulted in close to $500,000 in tax arrears between provincial, municipal, and district levels, including education. They have appealed that, and they're lobbying our MP to try and find some relief in that. We all know that a year ago or 2 years ago, this council and district council also waived interest and penalties regarding municipal property late payments. And I think that's all that they are looking for, is potentially some form of a payment plan, potentially. I don't have an answer, don't have a specific request. It's right now, I think we're going to have to follow the lead from the provincial government as to what goes on, because obviously the education portion would be the significant portion, and then district portion. But I asked the question because when you're talking about $500,000 from one individual taxpayer, it becomes significant to our bottom line. This is not a couple $1,000s on a individual property. So that's all I asked the question, and Director Donaldson's comments were sufficient for myself.
Okay, good. Thank you. Councillor Jagwitz, and not to cut you off, sir, does that provide clarification? Good, thank you. There's your thumb up. I guess in summary, I was going to ask about that small surplus, but it seems rather moot point. So in terms of extrapolation of what that might look like as we enter into our final budget machinations pre the public. Okay, I see no other hands. Committee, we're good. Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you, Mark Donaldson. Thank you for your involvement today, sir. You're free to go. And again, thanks for all that input. Item 5A, welcoming our director, Ken Becking, the Director of Public Works. Our first item of business is Glen Gordon Road, the potential improvements requested at our September 15th GNF committee meeting. Ken, welcome, sir, and you've got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report before you, as you've alluded to, is in response to committee's direction following a delegation from a resident relating to a portion of Glen Gordon Road between 1178 and 1191. The road, the current road is a very steep hill through this area, and there was concerns about its condition. Staff retained the services of Tatham Engineering to conduct an investigation of the situation and identify alternatives. The investigation concluded that the current roadway alignment, both vertically, horizontally, and geometrically, does not meet any recognized standard. As the report indicates, the consultant identified 3 options. The first 2 options are to construct a new road on new alignment. And the third alternative involves the extension of Alice Drive, which is the opposite end of the road, to link up with the area. According to the estimates, option 1 is the least expensive to bring the road up to a tolerable standard, and the expected cost is approximately $1.5 million. The second option is a slightly different alignment and has an increased cost up to $1.8 million. And the third option of extending Alice Drive to meet Glen Gordon Road has an expected cost of about $2.2 million. All of these alternatives, quite frankly, are not financially practical, considering that it serves less than 20 properties. On the flip side of that issue is the fact that the municipality has an obligation to maintain the road in a reasonable state of repair. On that basis, then, staff have identified a 4th option for your consideration, involving a reconstruction of the hill in its current location, with localized improvements to the width and the installation of a new surface on the road and some safety barriers to protect the traveling public. Staff would also recommend that you install some very carefully worded signage so as to limit the municipality's exposure to liability. With that, Mr. Chairman, that is the recommendation. And if council has any questions, I'll attempt to answer them.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, could we have some hands? Councillor Roberts, then Councillor Nishikawa. Go ahead, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to declare a conflict of interest. I live in Alice Avenue and past president, secretary, and treasurer of the Road Association for Leonard Lake Road 1 and Alice Avenue. I'll go dark.
Okay, thank you. Acknowledged by our clerk. Okay, good. Thank you, sir, for that. Okay, Councillor Nishikawa, go ahead.
Thank you through to Director Becking. I'm not sure that you can answer this actually. For many years that I've sat on council, we would get applications that would come forward that they would get a building permit based on water access only. So for instance, they wouldn't have a road, or there would be a road nearby, but it wasn't adequate. And I'm just kind of wondering if we're going to start getting more of these because of the way that we did the initial permitting. And I don't recall that there's a marina, for instance, or a landing on Leonard Lake. But if I used a bigger lake, if I would say Lake Muskoka, we would give access to some people that they would have water access only. But in fact, over the years, they built these roads that are not by any means, some of them you can barely get through with a fire truck. And I'm just kind of wondering where this sits with that, because I think we're going to get a lot more of this type of thing. And I'm not sure where our responsibilities start and stop. And in fact, again, if they're getting a permit based on water access only, what is our responsibility?
Well, good question. Very good question. Ken, Director Becky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response, I think the counselor raises a very good issue. That having been said, in this particular instance, it's moot because the municipality at some point in the past decided to spend public funds on this road. The inherent or the net effect of that is that you become the road authority and therefore responsible for the road. So as it relates specifically to this road, we are on the hook. Had we not spent public funds on the road, then Councillor Nishikawa's point is a valid one. We have no responsibility, but in this instance, unfortunately, we're stuck.
May I just have another follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
I am concerned though, Director Becking, that in 5 years' time, when you decide to retire or something in better places, what would be, do we have something that a next person coming along could have a policy, or do we have a policy, or do we even understand what some of this stuff looks like? Your explanation was great, but I don't know that it would necessarily, it has to filter through all the departments too, yes. Right? And I'm just trying to understand that whole principle and fix it going down the road. And I know it's not about this property today, and yes, I'll have to vote to do this today, but this is the opportunity to bring up these challenges, in my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I, as the report alludes to, this is part of a much broader issue. I think if council wishes, or committee or council wishes to deal with the broader issue, that a separate report has to come forward to address the concerns that have been raised by Councillor Nishikawa in a more fulsome way. And quite frankly, it has implications not only for Public Works, but also for Director Pink and the planning and development side of things. So I could see this becoming a joint report that's much broader in its application, but also would set the tone so that when I shuffle off to someplace else in whenever, then at least there'll be a basis for people to move forward with.
I'm going to let the CAO have a comment, and then Councillor Jaglowitz.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of committee. Further to Mr. Becking's comment, and I think where Councillor Nishikawa was going was the planning and development issues, as Mr. Becking alluded, are kind of intertwined here as it relates to some of these seasonal roads. And so definitely as we go through the official plan, that is something that should be contemplated. I've seen elsewhere where there was limited service provisions included as a general provision in zoning bylaws to recognize the fact that those types of properties get limited services, or there's the potential for difficulties with providing services such as fire, as the councillor mentioned. And that links back to some kind of standard as it relates to our seasonal roads. And I believe Mr. Becking's report addresses that, or suggests that he should come back with sort of a broader approach, likely some level of policy, as was suggested by Councillor Nishikawa. Thank you.
I appreciate you hanging there, Councillor Jaglowitz. With your indulgence, I would ask David's come on the screen. I would ask, thank you, sir. If David, would you provide comment, further insight to that? Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, committee, and through you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that certainly our current official plan, we do review, obviously, access provisions during any new lot creation proposal. And we wouldn't allow water access only lot creation unless there was a suitable marina or landing on the lake. And we would require a demonstration that a right-of-way exists across a private laneway if water access was not pursued. but I do recognize the issue raised. I think we have taken steps more recently. You will have noticed that the Director of Public Works or the Public Works Department and Emergency Services are now circulated all planning applications and comment on such aspects. So they would identify if the road access was untenable to a newly proposed lot. But the main clarification I wish to make is in our current draft official plan, we also do address this issue. As Mr. Becking correctly pointed out, it is a broader planning related issue, and there are some draft policies in the current official plan to recognize with respect to the extensive network of private roads we have throughout our township, and happy to go into further details through those discussions as we move through that project.
Thank you, David, for your comments. Councillor Jagdowitz and then Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm coming back to a specific project, this Glen Gordon Road. I'm a bit confused, so I'm just looking for clarification. Is this report just for information, or is there a resolution? That's my first question.
There is a resolution to move forward with some sense of reconstruction, depending on how this committee feels. So there are 4 options in front of you.
Okay, so those 4 options range from 200,000 to 2.2 million, and we just the last draft of the capital budget had 250,000 in for this project in 2022. So that was my my query. Or if we're taking action, it looks like we've only provided for 250,000. So
I certainly noted that myself. Director Becking, I mean, it is what it is, I suppose. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff put in a placeholder in the budget in expectation that the results would be as the report indicates. If anything, I erred on the side of caution and put in a little bit more than I truly thought would be required, but was waiting to get a little more information. It might be an area where committee and council might want to affect a reduction in the budget for that project, but I certainly wouldn't go any lower than the 200,000 that's indicated in the report.
Good, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, through you. I would welcome a report from Mr. Becking on the number of kilometers we have of township roads that are seasonally maintained and township roads that are not maintained at all. And if that could include a piece on whether or not they are plowed privately in the winter, that would give us a great idea of the access that's required of those roads. So I would really look forward to that.
Okay, thank you. And I must comment at this point, given the discussions we've had around this table regarding the 2022 Transportation Master Plan, I would ask that question will that master plan include this whole notion of seasonal versus full, et cetera, and then, as David has said, the OP as well. So I would look to the committee. Is that a clarity piece that you're looking for? I mean, it seems to me that we've got not a catch-all, but we've got two separate but related experiences going that same way. So Ken, I mean, is this contemplated in the Transportation Master Plan that you're going to provide all this information as opposed to a separate report sooner?
The short answer to your question, Mr. Chairman, is yes. At the end of the day, the Transportation Master Plan will address whatever we write in the terms of reference, and if it's committee's desire that the consultants address these issues, then I'm sure we'll be able to accommodate that. Good.
Committee, Councillor Hayes, what do you think of that, given your request? Go ahead.
I would much rather have a full report than split Mr. Becking's time with 2 reports. So I'm quite willing to do that. But I think that on the overall picture, as far as the official plan is concerned, knowing how many of these township roads are plowed during the winter would give us a better idea of whether or not our population is truly seasonal in those areas or whether it is a second home. And I think in many cases, we're looking at second homes.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Appreciate that insight. Councillor Kelly, then we'll move this on.
Thank you. And just a quick question that comes from one of the comments Councillor Hayes made. If I understood correctly, you were asking about municipal or township-owned roads that are plowed privately. And I'm trying to figure out if that in fact happens, are they plowed privately under contract with the township, or are we just allowing random people to plow our roads? That's a bigger issue for me. That's a bigger issue for me.
Ken, can you provide?
Mr. Chairman, the answer to Councillor Kelly's question is that yes, we do allow private individuals to maintain our roads during the winter, and they do so on their own volition, which is not what I would consider to be a very good idea. I'll just leave it at that. But to speaking in response to Councillor Hayes' comment, I think what she's looking for, I think is very astute and probably is better handled by staff, given our detailed knowledge of the lay of the land, as it were, than to try and get a consultant to extract from our heads 20, 30, 40, 50 years of history and background, and then basically regurgitate it back to us. So I would agree with Councillor Hayes's proposed approach.
Good, thank you. That's good to know. Councillor Richmond, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Zavitz. I agree with everything that's been said. I'm trying to get us maybe back on track now. I like option 4, the $200,000. So that would be what I would be supporting. I know you have to read a motion sometime soon.
Good, thank you very much for that. Okay.
Savage.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Councillor Edwards, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I also would support option 4. I can't see spending over $1 million on a road like that. And I think we're going to have to do something soon. We've had, and that request, I remember one where it was a seasonal road up to a certain point. They asked the township to look over it, and every time it rained, they were asking for gravel and everything else like that. I guess what do we have to look at is maybe it's buyer beware. If they buy on a seasonally road and they want to become a permanent residence, then they should look after it themselves, because we will not be able to afford looking after every road in this township at some point. I think we've got to draw the line somewhere, and this would be it. But if we have, and I would leave the $250,000 in the budget, because every time we take something out of the budget, we have to do it the following year, the year after, and that we're not. We're sort of sugarcoating it. We've got to say enough is enough. We've got to fix the roads. If they say a road has to be fixed in such and such a year, that's when it should be done. Thank you very much. But I would definitely support option 4.
Thank you. And for clarification, as everyone heard, the $250,000 is in the budget for 2022 as a placeholder. It's essentially committed, if you will. So foresight on that. The resolution I have, and I will get to you, Mayor, sir, is that we're simply selecting one of these 4 alternatives, and it certainly looks like I get a sense of where we're going. So, Mayor, go ahead, and then I'm going to call the vote.
Thank you very much. I am equally in favor of the alternative with a roughly $200,000 cost. I appreciate we have 250 in the budget. I do know that in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking for money in the budget and in the operating budget. So if possible, I think we might have potentially found ourselves $50,000 if the director is comfortable with that, but I'll leave that to him to come back to council with when we get back to budget discussions.
Good, thank you for that. Okay, so Looking to count, I see no other committee hands up. I'm going to read, I'm going to presuppose that I'm understanding that there is a general warm reception to number 4, alternative number 4. And I'm seeing some nodding of heads. So I will take that liberty. I will move by Councillor Bridgman, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that the General Finance Committee recommend to Township Council that alternative number 4 outlined in report PW 2021-028 be the preferred alternative to upgrade a portion of Glen Gordon Road. Now, before I ask for a show of hands, I would ask, does committee want there to be a item B on this, which is, and that staff, the director or public works staff would come back with a report on the seasonal road, just to make sure? No? Okay, good. Everybody's great. Okay, good. Then I'll call that vote. All those in favor of number 4 alternative?
Yes.
Yes, good. Thank you, sir. That's unanimous. Thank you all. Okay. Okay, Director Becking, sir, you've got 5B here, which is the Burgess 1 Dam financial overview and selection of a preferred alternative, which is from our October 13th GNF meeting. Thank you. You've got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report is a follow-up to a report from staff last month that went to council regarding identification of the preferred alternative. At that time, council asked for additional detail with respect to the cost of the various options, and that has been provided to you in this report. At this point, my sense of the mood of council is that that replacement of the dam is not deemed to be a viable option, and frankly, staff would agree with that approach. Similarly, the do nothing option is not an option for you, as I explained in my last report. That is simply in place as part of the class environmental assessment process in order to for comparative purposes. Reminder that because the municipality is the owner of the dam, we have an obligation to keep it in a state of good repair. And so in that way, the report before you is very much the same as the previous report. There were 2 rehabilitation schemes that were identified. One which involves maintaining the status quo in terms of power generation, and that produces a financial stream that would help to offset, although not totally eliminate, the net financial impact to the municipality. The other option would be to rehabilitate the dam and maintain a outlet from the channel to meet the minimum requirements for maintenance of flow, but would eliminate the power generation and therefore the long-term costs associated with maintaining the power generation capability. That is the decision before you. Do we just rehabilitate the dam, or do we rehabilitate the dam and maintain the power generation capability? As was the case in my previous report, we did identify a 4th alternative, which was to devolve ourselves of the responsibility for the dam by selling it and the riparian rights that go along with it. That is an option that council could consider and would require a more extensive examination, particularly because of the implicit legal implications for the alternative. That having been said, that devolution of the responsibility for the dam is a secondary exercise. Again, I have to point out to you that you have an obligation to maintain the dam in a fit state of repair. And until such time as the devolution is finalized, that obligation still exists. So we have to continue down the path that we are presently on until such time as you decide to devolve yourself of the responsibility and to finalize that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if there are questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Mayor Hardy, go ahead. Thank you. Thank you for that report. Mayor Hardy.
Thank you for that, and I do appreciate that at one point we certainly do have to maintain the structure. We're concerned about if we had another spring flood, losing that structure and the liability costs associated. So I think we need to continue to walk down that road. I guess where I'm really leaning here, under no scenario do I actually see a financial business case for rehabbing or replacing the generating station for Township of Muskoka Lakes. The added money sitting in the bank will make us more money for the municipality than it ever would in hydro production or generation. So I would like to continue down let's make this thing stable and at the same time think about divesting this asset. And if we can retain a portion of ownership, even a 1% portion, and potentially have an annual revenue stream that actually does go from divesting the asset, I think that's the appropriate way to go. And again, a further report can come back in closed session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And there's a lot of hands up. Pre those questions, I might ask if Director Becking, to the mayor's point, could you somehow indicate how we would go down a road of, I guess the word would be maintenance. Do we maintain that property till we decide to do anything with any of these 5 options? What does that look like? Is that built into your budget that we need to spend $82,000 like right now or 2022 just to keep the thing status quo? Is that a fair question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think it is a bit of a fair question. I may not be able to give you all the details that you'd be looking for, but suffice it to say that we have a dam safety review. It outlines certain things that need to be done. We are proposing to progress down the road of rehabilitation to address those issues subsequent to the completion of the Class EA process. And my strong advice to you would be to keep going down that road. We will do the design in 2022 and ideally do the construction work necessary to repair and rehabilitate the dam in 2023. So that's the path forward. As I've indicated earlier, I see the possibility of devolution as a parallel process that may come together before we spend the money on the rehabilitation. It may come together after we complete the work on the rehabilitation, but regardless, we need to keep marching forward in terms of being able to keep that dam in a safe, a fit state of repair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a lot of councillors with their hands up. So Councillor Bridgman, I see Councillor Jagwood's put his hand down. So Councillor Bridgman, Councillor Roberts, Councillor Hayes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Zavitz. I would like to have that closed session, Director Becking, to look at selling this off. And I think it behooves us to look at every option before us on a decision like this. So that is my comment.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I won't repeat what Councillor Bridgman just said yet. I think we need to look at every option before we state our preference. Thank you.
Okay, just for clarity, I think the options are in front of us. My only thought on that would be, is the director Becking try to indicate costing, and I guess that's where there's a rub. I'm going to give you a supplemental for certainly, Councillor Roberts. Maybe I misunderstand you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'm not in favor of option one, and I'm not in favor of selling anything to do with that dam. I'm supportive of, this is my initial thoughts. I'm supported on depending on the cost on getting rid of the generation if it's not profitable. But I think we need to be at the table for water management. And if we give up our only asset that involved, we could be out on the outside looking in. So, and I think that anyone purchased that for power, we lose control, and I think they are just for profit, which they should be. Thank you.
Good, thank you for that, Councillor Hayes, and then the mayor. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, Councillor Beck, or Director Becking, do you have a comment that might play into where?
I just wanted to be clear with committee, Mr. Chairman, that we're talking about two different processes. The process of rehabilitation has to proceed regardless of what you do. The devolution process is a parallel process. You can choose to devolve it to somebody else or not devolve it, but that is something that's totally independent and separate from the decision that's before you today, which is, am I rehabilitating that dam with or without generating capacity? That is the sole decision before you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hayes, go ahead.
Thank you. I would vote to redevelop it with a rehabilitation of the powerhouse. We would keep control of both the dam and the power generation. In, I think, about 8 years, the difference to do the powerhouse is about $600,000. So in about 8 or 9 years, that would be paid off. It does give us a foot in the door to the River Authority, like Councillor Roberts had indicated. And should we decide to divest it later, a working powerhouse would be much more than just a rehabilitated dam. So that I would vote in favor of option, I guess, 3.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Harding, Councillor Nishikawa, and then Councillor Jagowitz. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just through you, I guess, to the rest of council, as far as keeping our stake in the ground with the Muskoka River Water Management Plan, it's meant nothing to date. Let me just be very firm about that. The reality is we have more clout representing $10.5 billion worth of properties that are affected by the MRWMP than having a tiny little hydro production facility. We've yet to ever be consulted about the MRWMP, or recently even when SREL went in Bala, and I don't anticipate that changing. Happy to in our updates as well. I had a meeting with our new Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry last week discussing MRWMP. But again, whether we own this facility or do not own this facility will have no interest or bearing on our water levels across our system.
Good, thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Nishikawa and then Councillor Jagowitz.
Thank you. I'm not sure who this would be directed to, but I'm hearing the mayor, and that's been my experience, and I don't know. So what I was looking for, and I think it was, I'm getting the numbers mixed up now, but I believe that we have to rehabilitate the structure as far as power generation. And I was I was engaged for many years with the dollars that came through that generation plant, knowing some of the operators that were hired on that site. And it is very, very minimal in the big scheme of things. And as we know, we are giving away power to other locations and states that we're not using in Ontario. So I don't think that we should be focusing on hydro generation. I do believe that we should be trying to manage the flow of water. And I'm not the engineer, and I believe Director Becking has addressed it this way, of just opening up the floodgates and how much damage that could bring to if we didn't have that structure there. So I think the structure has to be repaired. But I wanted to also add, and I'm not sure, Director Becking, if you had comments on this, but I have heard these comments for a lot of years, actually, that the vegetation along the shoreline in that area has been removed, more or less. And so that also caused issues with when we had the flooding. Like basically, it's mowed lawn right to the, and there would have been the natural vegetation in that area. So I'm not sure if that's something we can address as well. I know a property owner in the area had brought it forward. I'm sure I'm going to hear about the property owners that use for a different purpose. But it's not waterfront, and they're not necessarily. So I'm not sure if we are just talking about just rehabilitating that, but I think we have to look at whatever else happened in that mill stream as well. Mostly, we need to do as much as we can to stop flooding on the river. Thank you.
Good, thank you for that. And Councillor Jaggers, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I do support the concept of divesting of this property. However, I understand that may take time. As far as if that option is not available right now, and if some work is going to happen to the dam, before I'd be in support of supporting power generation, I have a question, and it doesn't need an answer today, but before we go down that route, Mr. Becking, I did read your report and it followed through. And what I'm referring to is the $83,000 in projected revenue. That calculation is in a report you gave us in October. And how do you square the fact that that can generate 83,000, but to date we're only getting 12,000 for it? And I just wondered how you square that. Which of those numbers is wrong?
Mr. Chairman, neither of the numbers are wrong. They are based on the current number is actually 18,000. We receive a lease payment from our lessee of $1,500 per month for 12 months. So that gives you the $18,000 in revenue. With respect to the $83,000 mentioned in the report, that is premised on the assumption of average flows for the average number of years for which power can be generated, and that all of the revenues from the generation of power accrue to the municipality. So in other words, we would get rid of the middleman in the equation and apply the full value of the rate to the retirement of any debt or profit or loss.
Thank you. Thank you.
Supplementary?
No, go ahead, Frank.
So it would appear if we get to contract renewal, we may not have signed a good deal. In other words, what I hear you saying is that the actual generation power will be similar. It's just right now we're getting 18,000, and if we keep it all, we get 83,000. So it just somehow it's a bit, either we're giving away quite a large profit or we're anyway. So So just going back, I'm in support of not getting into the generation business unless there's some really good reason. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so seeing no other hands, sorry.
Here's at it.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello?
Councillor Edwards, go ahead.
Thank you. I support Councillor Hayes on this. I think we should rehabilitate it with the power generating. Our strategic plan says the environment, okay? And taking coal power or gas out, even if it's a little bit, that's working towards our strategic plan. Secondly, I would maintain control of it, and then we could be getting approximately 83,000 a year. And that I would not divest it at this time. I think that'll be for a future council, but I would go ahead and plan for the power generating, because Bracebridge and Huntsville are in the power generating in that business, and I think even if it's a break even, and that it shows that we are concerned about the climate and the environment. And that way, if we divest ourselves of it, then we have no control whatsoever. And I would not do that. It's ours at this point. We have to fix it up. So I would fix it up with generating and go ahead with that plan. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for that. I'm going to let the CAO chime in and then we'll wrap this up.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So to assist committee, a decision on divestment is not before you today. I've heard interest from a number of members for staff to bring back a report on that. We're happy to do so. So as Mr. Becking said, the township is responsible for this piece of infrastructure for the time being. And so the decision that we need to make today is really, we know we need to continue down the path of rehabilitation, which means continuing on with the environmental assessment process. So simply today, Mr. Chair, I think what needs to happen is a poll, if you will, of members of council as to power generation or no power generation, and that will be included in the resolution as to your choice there, and then the EA path will continue following that direction. Staff can come back to you again later on with a report on divestment for you to consider that option. But we need to continue down this path to ensure that the rehabilitation process is moving forward. Thank you.
I couldn't have said that better myself. So thank you for that clarity, sir. And I wonder if Councilor Nishikawa, before we kind of have a show of hands on this, go ahead, Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you. And I'm just would like to say where my confusion comes with the value that comes to the township, like the dollar value, the income level. I get very confused because I had heard, and perhaps Mayor Harding could comment on this. We had heard over the number of years that we were dealing with Swift River that in fact we would be restricted the amount of water.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe that we have that information today, but I believe that that is something that needs to be looked into if we in fact are wanting to turn this into a generation plant. We would get a fuller picture from the province of what they're actually going to allow us to do.
Yeah, excellent question, Councillor. I see the Director Becking has his hand up to answer, then I'll ask the Mayor's comment.
Mr. Chairman, in response to Councillor Nishikawa's comments, the financial estimate in the report is premised on the 4 cubic meters a second, which the municipality has legal rights to.
Right. As we understand it, the hydro plant flows for 96. We have 4, and that equals 100. And that is that correct, sir?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. Go ahead.
Thank you, and maybe just to help again moving this forward. I think the reality is both options. We're not going to, I believe, none of us want to do nothing because there's too much risk associated with that. As Director Becking has said, rehabilitation of dam, either in first and second option, needs to happen. Whether or not we rehabilitate the power generation or remove it, as long as we're going down a separate and parallel course, I believe we can answer that question after some closed session, after some considerations of diverging ourselves of this, of the hydro facility. My recommendation right now, again, I'm not sure what the resolution specifically is if we have to choose, but to a rehabilitation of dam period, that work would start. And we would, if possible, Director Becking, can we defer the decision on removal or rehabilitation for a couple of months till we fully investigate diverging or divesting ourselves of this hydro facility?
I'll let the director answer that. Go ahead, sir.
Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, the decision before you has to be specific. Either we're rehabilitating to include generation or not, because it affects the finished product that gets constructed.
Okay, good. Mayor Harding? Final?
Supplemental then, if we are to rehabilitate, I'm going to assume that would increase our value for divesting this asset because nobody wants to buy a brick wall. They're going to want to buy something that has some potential revenue. So if that's the case, I would have to agree that option number 3, rehabilitation.
Zavitz?
Go ahead, Councillor Edwards.
I would, and that second that with Mayor Harding, and that, as I said, nobody wants to buy a brick wall if we were going to divest ourselves. That way leaves the option open, so I would say rehabilitate it with power generating. Thank you.
Oh. Yeah, so it's either with or without, essentially, is where we as a committee find ourselves right here, right now. Before we call this, Director Becking, you want a last word?
No, I was solely going to point out to committee that the mayor's summary of the situation is correct. To his point, nobody wants to buy a brick wall, and that maintaining the power generating capability or the capacity to accommodate power generating capability gives you a more valuable asset at the end of the day. Whether you choose to put the power generating capability inside the plant it can be a secondary consideration.
On that road, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Jagowitz, then I'll call it.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if it's possible if there might be a seconder for an amendment to this, to add a second part to it that was suggested that then there be an investigation into the possibility of divesting. In other words, proceed with this with generation, which appears to be the recommended route, but immediately become a route of attempting to divest. Would there be a seconder for that amendment?
Is that a requirement based on where we are today? Right. So we could add to this resolution that staff be directed, as a result of commentary here, staff be directed to bring back a fulsome report on divesting of that asset in closed session.
That would satisfy me. That would satisfy me.
Okay, others, am I saying? Yeah, okay, good. So we're just going to take, oh, sorry, Derek have a final word and then we're going to do that. Maybe not.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So just so I'm clear, and to assist the clerk in drafting a resolution, so we may need to take a break for a minute or so, but is it the desire of committee to proceed down the path of the EA with the design process for power generation, along with a secondary piece of coming back with a report on divestment. Is that what we're, is that the desire of committee to proceed down that path?
Chair Zavitz?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. At this time, I don't think we need that. As I had said before, this is going to be long-term. It'll be the next council that actually, and that goes with that. We know if we're selling the dam and that with power generating, it will be more of a value than not. So I don't think it's required at this time. We can do that later, and just keep it clean. Get on with the motion. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give the mayor the final word. Thank you for that, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, Chair Zavitz. I guess a question to staff. I don't necessarily have to have the selling of this asset or potential selling in the motion. I believe we're probably okay with just a note in the minutes that staff will be coming back at a future time with a report. If that satisfies the clerk and or our CAO that just noted in the minutes, I think we can probably read the resolution as is, and but just noted in the minutes that we would be considering at a future time in closed session divulging ourselves of this asset. Thank you.
Well, I'm seeing a nodding of heads in the committee, and that certainly satisfies the clerk. I will then look to you as a committee. There are essentially 5 alternatives in front of you, of which number 1 and number 5 have already been discussed. Whether that fits into the mix today, I don't believe it does into the vote piece. So we're really voting on item 2, which is to remove, rehabilitate and remove power generation, or 3, rehabilitate the dam and the powerhouse. And or I suppose 4, which would be a fulsome replacement, but we haven't had any discussion on that. So I'm going to look to you first. So I'm seeing I guess I suppose I don't know, a show of hands or fingers, maybe it is, in terms of 2, item 2, which is to remove power generation, or 3, to rehabilitate the dam and powerhouse. So I'm seeing everybody with 3. Okay. Councillor Edwards, do you have a
3, and that rehabilitate with power generating?
Okay, so that's essentially unanimous. So I would read a resolution to that effect, moved by Councillor Jagger. Okay, sorry, moved by Councillor Jagger, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved that the General Finance Committee recommended Township Council that alternative number 3, as outlined in report PW 2021-027, be the preferred alternative to rehabilitate the Burgess 1 Dam. All those in favor?
Yes.
Okay, good. Unanimous. I can't help but notice, Mayor, do you have a parting comment? No, good. Okay, you seem, I think you did. Thank you very much for that, committee. Good work on that. And thank you, Director Becking. He's gone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Excellent. So I'm going to move on to item 7, which is the item A, minutes of the library board meeting held on August 10th. Accept those into the public record and thank them for all their hard work. 7B, minutes of the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee meeting held on May 20th. Wow, September 3rd. This is the September 30, 2021 minutes. Parks and Trails Advisory Committee. We'll accept those under advisement. Thank you. And we'll submit those into the record, the public record. Item 8A, minutes of the Grants and Economic Development Advisory Committee held on August 25th, 2021. If there's any commentary, I'm seeing none. Again, we'll accept those minutes into the public record. Thank you. Item 9, I will ask the committee now, is there any unfinished business that you'd like to raise or comment on? Okay, thank you for that. Seeing none. New business, District Municipality of Muskoka updates. I guess we go right to the mayor, sir, if you would like, and then we'll go down the list of councillors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We had our meeting October 20th. Our bin site transition program is continuing forward. There will be 19 removed this year, 46 at the end of 22, and the remaining 42 in the year 2023. Many of those within Muskoka Lakes are going to be transitioning to what we'll call curbside collection, where they'll have their own bins at some of the landings. So working through that, and staff doing a great job. We're going to be doing semi-annual speed limit reviews on our roads. We've had a number that were requested from township. One in particular that has been denied, and that was Muskoka Road 26. There was a request to lower the speed. The general travel portions at 85th percentile are already within that, and to lower the speed is just not appropriate, but they are going to be adding some other traffic calming measures and increased signage. But otherwise, we'll be dealing with those basically every 6 months and group reports for speed limit amendments. That was my Public Works meeting. I also alluded to it slightly earlier that had the opportunity, had a meeting with Minister Rickford, who is the new minister in charge of the MNRF. Had a very, very good meeting about our Muskoka River Water Management Plan potential amendments. He has promised a response specifically in answer to some of our questions about considerations of lowering water levels at certain times. And he's responded back that we'll be getting together hopefully by the end of this month, or let me just put it early January, one of the two. I also had the opportunity to chat with the Premier on the weekend. And again, the same thing. So his commitment to MRWMP is forthcoming as well. So good dialogue. I'm sure everyone has also noted, just as a update, that our MPP, Norm Miller, will not be seeking re-election next term, and has spent 20 years serving Simcoe Muskoka. Graydon Smith, the mayor of Bracebridge, will be seeking that nomination. He's also stepped down from his position as AMO president right now. And if he does not happen to get in, if we have a change of leadership from a conservative government potentially to a liberal government in district or township, or sorry, Simcoe Muskoka in June, Mr. Smith will not be seeking re-election to become mayor. So his term as mayor in Bracebridge is done. And that would be my update. Thank you.
That's quite the update. Thank you. Thank you for that information. I will comment at this time, Councillor Jaglowitz has had to leave the meeting and he will not be able to make his district report. I will move to Councillor Nishikawa. Now I see your hand is up. Is it not for your report that your hand is up? So go ahead.
Thank you. I had a question for Mayor Harding to sort of take back, and I know that I could make this as private, but I thought all of you should hear this. When we put up no parking toll signs on the district roads, who's doing that? And I'm just going to use the Hardy Lake situation as an example. It was a terrible Thanksgiving weekend. And in fact, when the police were called, they just were traffic cops. They were just standing in the middle of the parking lot directing how people could turn around. There were no tickets issued. We're not correcting our problems, and this isn't the only road that we have put these signs in. I was on a drive yesterday and noticed a number of locations that have no parking tollway zones. I'll use Southwood Road for an example, and those are not being dealt with. And my concern is, where do we draw the line between bylaw officers, police, and all of that? And I do believe that it's something that we should have a direction. Many of us should know this going forward. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. And I see the mayor's hand up. Go ahead, Mayor Harding.
Thank you. I also see Director Becking has turned on his camera, so you may want to supplement. But regarding Hardy Lake and Thanksgiving weekend, clearly, if anybody drove down Highway 169, it was incredibly popular. And, it's a great way to turn an 8-kilometer hike into a 14-kilometer hike, because you've got 2 kilometers to go from your car to get to the entrance of the trail. But there's no question that we need our own bylaw to show up at that particular location on holiday weekends and events. That would be something that would have been missed. The OPP were there for safety concerns. They do not issue parking tickets. But they did show up because there were so many cars, people stopping and unloading on the highway, but just from a traffic to keep traffic moving. Director Becky, I'm not sure if you want to comment as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the mayor is correct. With respect to the signs, the district as the road authority is the only entity that's authorized to put up the signs after suitable process of passing a bylaw. That having been said, they delegate the authority for enforcement to the township, and the township bylaw enforcement officers do have the authority to go in and issue citations if they feel it's appropriate to do so.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Well, I just wanted to say though that I did bring this forward to our, and again, it was not about Hardy Lake Road, it was particularly Southwood Road, because residents were contacting me nonstop. And there seemed to be a hesitancy to deal with a district road. And so, as I said, I hope that there can be further dialogue with bylaw, that it's very clear to everyone what our expectations are when we put things in place. Thank you. And did you want me to?
Go ahead. Yes, please proceed. Go ahead. Sure.
I'll just tell about health services. So the majority of our discussions now are about the redevelopment of the Fairburn home. We've had a number of meetings about that. We've had great improvements with our paramedic services. Additional funding was given to them for the community outreach service. So again, I've mentioned this before, if you get taken by ambulance, some of those paramedics may respond to checking up on you. And for instance, they even drive a little car. They're not even driving ambulances, for instance. So, I mean, that's a great benefit. And I know that I've seen members in our community and the benefit of having the station on the Gravenhurst side, very, very close on 169. I've seen very quick responses, and I also got messages back that those happen to be older seniors appreciate those visits from those paramedics, because otherwise they couldn't necessarily get checked up on. And mostly, I think everyone heard about the outbreak at the Pines again, and I will continue to forward that information to councillors as it goes, but it was dealt with and it is being dealt with. And it's just a reminder. And again, we heard this on the news yesterday, that we're well in the fourth phase. Like things are not going as smoothly as we hoped. And now that we're going to be inside more, we have to be more vigilant on things. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Good, thank you. We'll be hearing more about that this afternoon at council. Okay, Councillor Edwards, are you feeling comfortable enough to, before we hear from you on your update by phone, Councillor Mazan, go ahead.
Sorry, and through you, I was actually just going to provide a quick update on the recreational master plan. So I'd like to hear from Councillor Edwards first. I was going to ask for your permission to do so.
Of course.
Thank you. So I'll wait till that. Councillor.
Yes, Councillor Edwards, are you here with us?
I'll try my best. First of all, we had a presentation from Jeff Ross, the chair of the Watershed Council, excuse me, on the community roundtable and integrated watershed management. And what they're doing is trying to get the community to get more involved with the watershed. And we had official plan amendment 53 for the Moose Deer Point community water intake. Basically, it's 1,000 meters around, and that to try and save it. There was subdivision on Huntsville, which I won't mention, and the Ontario Housing Priority Housing Initiative Capital Fund. They are putting some money towards Habitat for Humanity, and some will be going to the two new affordable housing units in Bala. And the approval funding received from that will be $285,100. And that is, and then whereas the District of Muskoka is receiving a funding letter from the ministry for $1,317,800 for the Social Services Relief Fund for the period 4 from April 1st to March 31st, 2022. And the phase invest $556,200 in funding will be committed to December 1st, and $761,600 for the fourth quarter, January to March 22nd of the year. And that is my report.
Well, that is a good news report. The folks of Bala will be glad to hear that affordable housing has been given a second piece of recognition. And Councillor Hayes, you must be happy to hear that. We had a meeting just the other day, and we've been waiting for that information. So thank you for a little bit of a sneak peek. Councillor Kelly, you've got a thought before Councillor Mazan. I'm going to give you the floor.
Okay, she was in first, but real quick, December the 11th, we're going to be having a Santa Claus parade through Port Carling. So we're revitalizing it. We're bringing it back up. It's on very short notice because we just got the a week ago, I guess, from the the Muskoka District Health Unit, thanks in no small part to some pushing and prodding from our mayor. Thank you for that. The Lions Club have regrouped around it. We are looking for, actually, we are overwhelmed by the response we're getting in terms of sponsorship. There's still room for some more floats, although we're going to have I think we're going to have a full cast. I think we're going to have literally in the low thousands of people, because it's going to be drawing from people who really want to get out and celebrate. There will be COVID precautions in place, and they will be well publicized in advance starting tomorrow with a social media campaign. Essentially, you can participate along the route, watching the parade with people from your own family unit without a mask. If you can't social distance from people who are in your own family unit, you'll have to wear a mask. We have, because of COVID, abandoned the traditional ending, which was at the community center on Bailey Street. We are not going to do that. The parade will just wind down there. There will be no after parade in the at the community center. But I'll tell you the response, and we have not publicized it yet. We've just started making inquiries to get people lined up for floats, get people lined up for some sponsorship. Response has been really, really gratifying. So save the date, make sure you're in town, 6 o'clock in the evening, starts at Ferndale Road, runs up Joseph Street or Highway 118, and then it ends basically in front of the community center. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I know as it speaks to Port Carling, and before I call on the mayor, and he may be going to usurp me here, I would want to speak for 1 minute to Val, and I would either put either the mayor, you, Councillor Kelly, as our representative on the Chamber of Commerce, or Corey Moore, who is also on this call. I would give it to one of you to give an update, if you would then please, on the Bala status in terms of the Santa Claus presence. So Mayor Hardy, you have your hand up. Is that?
Thank you. My understanding is December 3rd, they're doing, I think it's the 3rd, they're doing a virtual Santa Claus parade again. And that's sort of the extent of it. There'll be more information on the Chamber's website. And I just leave that at that. From a Port Carling perspective, Councillor Kelly, thank you. And always happy to support. I think it is good for all of Muskoka. And it's not a Bala or a Port Carling. We are Muskoka Lakes. And we need to encourage everyone to be part of that, first and foremost. I would ask, though, that maybe on your social media, we can share, or if you could send it out to council, because to get more involvement, to spread the word, and especially for those people who want to create floats, who should they contact? Is there an email address, a phone number? And I'd encourage all of council to share that, in the words of Councillor Zavitz, here and now on your social media. So hopefully you can send that to us all and we can rebroadcast. Thank you.
But thank you. Just so you know, we're meeting tonight to finalize the poster and the social media campaign. The contact person, as always, is Cathy Duck at the library. But we'll make sure it gets well publicized with her email or some way to get a hold of her on social media.
Good, thank you. To clarify for the people that are watching and to our public, again, this is a Lions Club sponsored event, if you will, with the cooperation of the public library here in Port Carling. The Bala Santa Claus Parade has typically been supported through the Chamber of Commerce. So just to draw that, there is a very seriously different group of people, and I know that there's a great strong pivot going on now in Port Carling, and hey, thank you. We're definitely going to support that initiative all we can, and that'll be the messaging. Okay, so I'm going to actually, if I could, wind back to item 7. I'm going to call it C, which would be an observation from our chair of the Recreational Master Plan Committee, Councillor Mazan. In this case, Chair Mazan. Go ahead and speak with enlightenment on the Rec Master Plan as it relates to where it is right here and now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll try to be brief. As far as enlightenment, it's actually just more quick status update. The steering committee has just received some of the reports of the data that has been collected over the last number of months, specifically technical data, an overview of the facilities, also the results of the public survey. So our steering committee has been given a few weeks to be able to absorb that information. We will be meeting towards the end of November with the view of having an update to this committee in December from our consultant as a preliminary one. We're still looking forward to Q1 to get to the more final completion, but we felt it was important that this project has been moving along. We have received some data. I believe almost all of councils had their personal one-on-one interviews. So all of this data is being pulled together, and the project is continuing to move forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions now, but I would probably suggest the best thing is to wait until next month when you will start getting a sense as to the information that we have been receiving. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. Thank you for the work. Committee, any questions of that or anything you've heard in terms of updates, et cetera? Okay, I'm going to move us along now into item 11, which is that general information and correspondence piece that we have our monthly wrestle with. And I'm going to say it only because items A, which is an item 11G from the October 13th, 2021 general finance agenda is still on here. And of course, while we have, I'm presuming, we have actually moved it on, and it's reflected in the minutes of the general finance agenda of that date. It's still here. It's on here, and I'm going to ask the question of the clerk on item A, 11A, item 11D, and 11E. Should I presume? Sorry, Deputy Clerk Hollows would have a comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. These items, we receive these items from different municipalities monthly. And at the last meeting, we were requested to make note of when the letters have been received previously before. So often municipalities, when they endorse a resolution from one municipality, they send that endorsement through to us. So we have been providing all of the correspondence that we receive regarding a matter. And so that's essentially what we've provided there. So.
Good, and thank you for that clarification. Does that work for the committee? Is that understanding of where that particular facet goes? Seeing no hands, okay, good. We have no closed session today, so I'm going to move to adjourn. Thank you for your help today. Thank you for your presence. Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Hayes. Be it resolved that this meeting adjourn at 12:20 p.m. And the next regular meeting of the General Finance Committee will be held on Wednesday, December the 15th, 2021 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair electronically from the council chambers, municipal office in Port Carling, Ontario. All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes, good. Thank you, sir. Okay, Mayor, sorry.
Sorry, just before we break, I'm going to request that maybe we start council at 1:15. Give everybody just a good 45, 50 minutes to get organized. But I'm going to ask our clerk's department if we could put up at 1 p.m. a broadcast that says the meeting will start at 1:15, because we do have a number of delegates coming in at 1 o'clock. But I think it's appropriate for staff to be able to have at least 50 minutes, 55 minutes in between time. So thank you.
Thank you. I might also comment, Councillor Edwards, if you would, I would imagine there could be a space for you here at the township office, should you require.
I'm hoping I can get it up on Zoom from here. If I have to, I will, and not come over partway through the meeting, but we'll see. And I think 1:15 is a great idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll see you all at 1:15.